believe so. Hope so.
Good evening. Wednesday, October 28, 7 p.m. Time for the monthly meeting of the Valley County Board of Commissioners. And we will begin with prayer.
Our Heavenly Father, as we go through the very difficult economic times, please give us the guidance and wisdom as we go through our agenda and our meeting tonight, so we will make the best decisions on behalf of the public that we represent. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Stepka?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Max Bauer? Here. Inman?
Here.
Hooper?
Here.
Friend? Here. Fleece?
Excused?
Chairman Thomas?
Here. Thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda?
I just want to announce for the commissioners, the annual planning awards banquet is Thursday, November 5th, and if you haven't RSVP'd and you plan on attending, please call Midge in planning in the next few days, please. Okay?
Oh, we do have this resolution for
MSU.
Michigan State.
Yeah, he's going to
We'll do
speak
that
under
public
public comment. Do you want to add that to the agenda? That's probably a good idea.
Let's add it to new business,
Do you want it under new business?
Or just special orders of business.
or yours,
Okay,
either one. Put it under your section.
okay.
Does everybody like the agenda as it is? Motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Special order of business. Public hearing, Brownfield. Where are you?
There she is.
Good evening. My name is Jean Dorenzi. I am the coordinator, Brownfield coordinator for Grand Traverse County.
I'm Raymond Minervini with the Minervini Group.
And this evening, the Brownfield Authority is asking for your consideration for approval of the amended Brownfield Plan for Grand Traverse Commons and the village at Grand Traverse Commons. This plan encompasses property both in the city of Traverse City and Garfield Township with concurrence required from both elected bodies. The city of Traverse City concurred on October 19th and Garfield Township concurred on October 22nd. The Brownfield Plan, as outlined on Exhibit B, encompasses subareas 2, 3, 5, and 6. Subarea 6 is where the historical barns are located, and there are eligible activities within the Brownfield Plan for that as well. The total eligible investments is $26,770,457, as outlined on Exhibit B of your packet. And with this amendment, it will add an additional $125 million of private investments and over 796 new jobs to the community. The new taxable value after the end of the Brownfield Plan is anticipated to be over $48 million. With the cleanup of the environment, the functionally obsolete buildings, bringing the functionally obsolete back to the community into a usable use, the Brownfield Authority is asking for your approval of this plan, with the plan ending in 2032.
And with that, I'll now open the public hearing on this. Is it, anybody from the public have anything they want to say about it?
Ross Peterman. I am the chairperson of the Recreational Authority of Garfield Township in the city of Traverse City, and we are excited about the potential of this new plan because it includes Subarea 6, which is the 56 acres owned by the Recreational Authority, and has a potential for helping us to construct the South Campus entrance, sometimes referred to as the Frankie Road extension. Also, the removal of some buildings on the site that are not called for in the Commons master plan, and also some extensive and expensive environmental remediation work that we have to do before we can really get serious about making improvements there. So we hope for an affirmative response from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll close the public hearing. We have a resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to approve the resolution as presented.
Support?
Moved and supported, discussion. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is Community Foundation presentation.
You need to pass those out, or you? Okay, thank you.
One of your pens. I just threw mine down on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Susan Cogswell, and I'm a board member of the Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation. Community foundations began at the turn of the last century in Cleveland, Ohio, and began in the 1920s in Michigan. The Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation was founded in 1992. And yes, we're only 17 years old, or young as you may want to believe, but boy, do we have something that we are very proud of. Do you realize that the Grand Traverse Community Foundation is just one of more than 60 certified community foundations in Michigan? And yet in our 17 years, we rank among the top 5 in gifts received. Let me just repeat that. That's very happy news. We are one of 60 community foundations in the state of Michigan, and yet we rank among the top 5 of gifts received. We also involve more than 2,000 volunteers annually in the grant-making process. We've distributed more than $30 million since 1992 to benefit the 5-county area. And last but not least, we hold more than 280 funds which have been established by families, organizations, businesses, civic groups, and schools. Well, in 2007, the Grand Traverse County Commissioners, we attended a board meeting just like we are attending tonight, and we requested that October 2007 be designated Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation Month. You did, and we are very grateful. Well, since that time, we have continued to make it a little tradition to meet with you each October in order to provide with you an update of our activities. As you already, I can tell, glancing through your packets, and I appreciate you taking the time to look at them, this is our annual report, and if you'll open up to the page where it says Vision and Leadership. I just want to make a note about that where it states under our Vision Leadership that the hallmark of the Regional Community Foundation is our partnership with donors. Number 1, to identify and address community needs. Number 2, to promote innovative charitable ideas. And in this day and time, creativity is really important. And number 3, strengthen existing nonprofit organizations. I can only imagine that by going around the table, each and every one of you are involved with a nonprofit organization. And as you mentioned earlier, during these very dire financial times, each and every nonprofit organization is looking for every dollar to make sure the bottom line stays in the black. So it's very important from the Regional Community Foundation that we strengthen the existing nonprofit organizations. Well, on that same page, when we talk about vision and leadership, I'm also proud to say we have an excellent leadership team in place. And speaking of which, I'd like to introduce a couple of our staff and board members who are present tonight. Our Executive Director of 15 years is Jean Snow, and board member Clarine Olson. Also in your packet, if you notice on the yellow page, I want to just talk to you just a minute about a couple of our programs. The yellow paper is entitled The Crisis in Food Availability for Those in Need. Did you know that between 2005 and 2008, the number of persons served in the regional food pantries has doubled? Between 2005 to 2008, the need has doubled. Well, what is our community foundation doing about that? Well, number one, we are offering this information to interested donors, and we are certainly the capital of clearinghouse of donors in this community. And number two, we are encouraging agencies, the food pantry agencies in particular, to apply for grants that support the human services. Now, you're also going to find a sheet in there of happy and smiley and cheerful teenagers. Take a minute to look at this page. I think one side says nonprofit internships, and just turn it on the other side, you'll find the happy, cheerful faces. This is called our Nonprofit Internship Program. This program was started due to the continued feedback from nonprofit organizations saying that they had a great need for staff which could be fulfilled by student interns. And here's a quote from Malaya from Traverse City West High School. She was an intern with the Watershed Center at the Grand Traverse Bay. She said, "I really enjoyed my internship experience. I learned so many things about a nonprofit organization and the Watershed Center. This was an amazing way to see what careers in this field are really like day to day." Other capital campaigns and projects that are currently underway in the Grand Traverse County include access to recreation at the Boardman Lake, the long-awaited Botanical Garden Society project, and one, I have to tell you, it's hot off the press today. Did you see the front page? This is called the Fourth and Goal for Thrilby Field Campaign Project. As many of you know, I'm sure you're all familiar with this one, it contained two phases. Phase one was $1.3 million, and it helped to construct bathrooms, locker rooms, concession stands on both the north and the south side of Thrilby Field, plus an elevator for the press box. Phase two, $825,000 was an estimated amount for the turf for the field and the site work. Well, this is over a $2 million project. Phase one, we are on the 1 yard goal line. We only have $70,000 more to go. And phase two, the turf for the field, Don and Jerry Olson, and they announced in the paper this morning, have pledged to take care of phase two. We are so very proud of this project, and we're proud of all the projects that we have helped over the last year, a dozen different capital campaigns in the last year. Well, as you can see, I'm bringing you good news tonight. Our Community Foundation story is an ongoing, active one, and we appreciate the time that you have allowed us to tell you the story. Time to share with you how your Grand Traverse County Regional Community Foundation continues to serve and enhance the quality of life for this county. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, and I have to introduce our board treasurer, Bud Klein. Thank you very much for your time and support.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for her? Next is District Court.
Good evening. I'm Carol Stocking. I'm the District Court Administrator, And we've been invited back to talk briefly about the mental health court. I'm going to start out and I'm going to introduce Jeff Boyce to you, who's going to finish up with his portion. Some of this you may have heard in some earlier meetings that I've attended, maybe even the budget hearings, but the mental health court began in February of 2009 with grant money that we received from the State Court Administrator's Office in the amount of $54,000. Judge Forsman presides over this specialty court. This is a collaborative effort between community mental health and the district court. That's one of the requirements of the grant, is that we have to have a good working relationship with the community mental health, and we have that. The court's grant money can only be spent on administrative costs associated with the program, whereas community mental health has a separate grant, and their grant money is spent on the treatment for the program. With the 2008-2009 grant that we received in the amount of $54,000, we really only spent about $2,300 of that. We struggled trying to figure out how to spend administrative money, excuse me, and they did allow us to carry any unspent money over into this fiscal year. In addition, we did apply for the 2009-2010 grant, and we were awarded an additional $28,000, which actually is on the agenda for November approval. The new funding source for the 2009-2010 grant is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. There is no local match affiliated with this program. We struggled in the beginning trying to find clients or defendants who were eligible for the mental health program. And so we worked very hard. We have a very committed team, and Jeff's going to tell you a little bit about that, but we have a very committed team to this court program. And so we worked through our problems, and we made some changes. Some of the changes we made were, in the beginning, we were going to offer everyone a delayed sentence, meaning that at the end of their probation, the conviction would not be on their record. We found that that really wasn't the hook that we needed to get people into the program, so we've done away with it being a delayed program exclusively. It can be a delayed, or it can be a true conviction at the end, and that decision is truly up to the prosecutor involved in our program. We removed the legal criteria. We, in the beginning, thought we were going to have so many people qualified for the program, we were going to have to somehow monitor or police, the numbers coming in. We had the opposite problem. We were struggling trying to get people in. So in the beginning, we had, I think the criteria was 3 crimes in the past 5 years or something like that. We did away with that altogether. The only requirement we have, and this is a requirement of the grant, is that you have an Axis 1 diagnosis. And the only exceptions to qualifying is those who are unwilling to participate don't have to. Obviously, it's a volunteer program. Crimes that involve children as victims do not qualify for the program. And then if your mental illness is mental retardation or developmentally disabled, you are not qualified for the program. In the early stages, we also designed the program to be much like sobriety court, where you have multiple phases you have to work through over your 18 to 24-month probation period. We eliminated the phases. We found that it complicated things. It was too confusing and overwhelming for the defendants in this particular program. So what we've come up with is we focus on their personalized treatment care program. So each person has an individual plan according to what their issues are, and Jeff works very closely with them on following through on that care plan. And then most importantly, in the beginning, we didn't really have an identified person at Community Mental Health who was working on the program. They kind of had someone the equivalent of me coming to the treatment meetings, and that she was an administrative person. And while she was committed, it really wasn't an effective person for the team. So they have finally identified a person who is designated to do the assessments on that end. She works very closely with Jeff. now, and in addition, we are going to hire a half-time case manager on our side who will be the first point of contact for these folks, who will tell them about the program and help early on identify whether they have potential Axis 1 diagnosis. And she will be the same person on the CMH side who actually does the assessment. So it already is working much, much better, and she's kind of been with us about a month, right?
That's correct.
So those are the kinds of things administratively that we've done to get the mental health court program up and running. And so now I'd like to introduce Jeff Boyce. He is our intensive probation officer who oversees this whole program along with the team and Judge Forsman.
Thank you for giving me your time this evening. The first thing I'd like to say is I've been a probation officer for 6 years, and I've seen results through probation, but until I did the mental health court, I hadn't seen the results that were as significant that this program has helped people achieve. So I'm very grateful to have this position, and I really enjoy it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the team and the collaborative effort between everyone to try to, for the common goal of trying to rehabilitate some of the defendants. The team consists of, obviously, the Judge Forsman. We have a representative from the prosecuting attorney's office. We have 2 defense attorneys, Melanie Stanton and Commissioner Stepka are both on the team. We have the CMH worker who is a really integral part in this team. We also have several treatment providers, including Addiction Treatment Services and Catholic Human Services. We have a representative from the Department of Human Services. We have the owner of Traverse Area Support Services on the team, and we also have someone from Goodwill Industries. The normal procedure for someone to enter the mental health court program is, first of all, we need to get a referral, and that person needs to be identified. And we can get referrals from any number of sources, including judges, defense attorneys, treatment providers, staff at the jail, police officers, other probation officers, or sometimes we'll even get referrals from a defendant's family or friends. After that person's been identified, they'll have an assessment through community mental health to determine the significance of the mental health issue that the person has. And all of that information will be compiled and brought to the team as a whole, and the team will discuss the case and either approve or deny entry into the program. Then it would move forward to sentencing, and Judge Forsman would formally sentence the defendant into the mental health court program. While in the program, the defendants have to comply with probation meetings with me, and they would meet with me at least once a week. I have pretty much an open door policy. They can come in as many times as they want a week, and I've had a couple of defendants ask me, hey, can I meet with you every day for the next 2 weeks? It really helps me to get on track with my program, and that's not a problem at all. And we also have review hearings where the defendants actually report directly to the judge as to how their progress is and how things are going. Some of our goals, the defendants have 2 goals. They have treatment goals, which they work with their different counselors, treatment providers, AA sponsors, NA sponsors in achieving those goals. But we also have some program goals. One of the main program goals is to enable the defendants to live independently, and also to reduce recidivism. And I'd like to I have 2 people so far in the program that have just done such an outstanding job that every time I meet with them, I'm surprised. And we have a person that, when they came into this program, he was convicted of a drunk driving case. When he got out of jail, he was homeless and had nothing more than a bag of clothes. That's all this guy had. And through his mental illness and treating the mental illness himself with alcohol, he went from a lifestyle of earning about $450,000 a year to a bag of clothes. He now has a place to live since he's been in the program. He now has employment. He now has a regular contact with treatment providers. He had been in treatment programs before, but would just sporadically go. He's now paying his child support, and he's now attempting reconciliation with his children, which I think is a huge thing. Not only his children, his whole family. We have another defendant that I was familiar with before he came into the program, and to be honest with you, I was pretty skeptical. I had this, when I did regular probation, I've had this defendant on probation several times, and there's never been a successful completion of probation. It usually would end in a violation for using drugs, which were his underlying crimes that got him placed on probation. But now this person has been in the program, and they have 5 months where they haven't violated at all. And they're being drug tested on a random, regular basis. He has a good attitude. He's finally vested in a recovery program, has a sponsor, goes to his treatment appointments, and he actually, when he comes into court to report to the judge, he really participates. And as he said to me, I don't view the court anymore as a punishment. I view this as coming in, and I can be proud of myself to sit in front of that judge and say, these are the things that I've accomplished. I'm not in here because you're going to sentence me to jail today. These are the good things that I've done. And one of our incentives for him for doing good for a period of time is we applauded him. The whole team and the rest of the defendants and the judge applauded him. And the smile on this guy's face, I mean, you couldn't beat that. It was probably worth more than anything to me in this program. It was wonderful to see somebody actually happy and really doing a great job. So I guess in closing, some of the key points that I want to make that make the mental health court an important part of our community is that I have seen a difference when someone receives the appropriate treatment and their appropriate level of supervision. The recidivism rate is significantly reduced, which results in a safer community for us. Encouraging a healthy lifestyle for someone, that encourages them to be more productive in the community. And one of the major things is if you change one person, that affects every person that defendant comes in contact with in the community. And therefore, they become integrated into the community and become a part of it instead of feeling that they're an outcast. Again, thanks for your time to come here and speak about this. Is a program I'm really excited about. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I'm a little bit confused. Commissioner Friend and I met last week with the Northern Lakes mental health people and the jail administrator, the undersheriff, and they talk a lot different story. They talk about how many people are in our jail who have mental health issues. You know, you're talking about not finding enough people to fit in your program, and they're telling me about literally dozens of people that are in the jail, and we get 2 assessments. You know, we absolutely, the consensus coming out of that meeting from everyone from the jail administrator to the undersheriff to the people from Northern Lakes Mental Health, we absolutely are not meeting the mental health needs in our jail. But yet you sit here and tell me you can't find people to fit your program.
Right.
I'm trying to tie these two together.
And I'm not in the mental health world, so I may not get this exactly correct, Sonny, but let me tell you a couple things. One is that the grant requires that we only take people who have an Axis 1 diagnosis. An Axis 1 diagnosis is like bipolar, schizophrenia, major
All
depression.
major mental illnesses.
It's really pretty narrow. And what you're talking about and what I believe that they're seeing in the jail are people who have things like
personality disorders and access to diagnosis.
and things that we can't take into the program today because the grant limits us. Now, if this program continues and it's no longer grant funded, then we can open the doors to the folks that you're talking about, but right now we can't. And we have expressed that. We actually had the State Court Administrator's Office come up just last month, and they did a review of our program, and they spent almost half a day talking to many of us. And that is one of the things that a couple of us told them, is that we really feel restricted by the Axis 1 diagnosis, that we aren't really touching the population in the community that we feel needs to be addressed. We know we think that's a real limitation. So hopefully they'll hear us.
You know, we're hearing from them about, you know, the number of mental health issues in our jail, and, you know, mental health, Northern Lakes Mental Health does not have the personnel to deal with it. We also have an illustrious decision by the Attorney General recently that says that if mental health services are required in the jail, the county is responsible to pay for it. Although we have an agreement with Mental Health, the organization, that says they are required to provide services in our jail. So I'm not sure just how this is all going to shake out. I don't think any of us have all the answers yet. But, you know, I guess my key point is the fact that we have an absolute unmet need for mental health services in our jail. And I think all of us that are involved in the program, from the mental health court all the way down through the jail administration and the deputies on the street, we have to address that need, because just picking those folks up and taking them to jail is not getting us anywhere.
And really, we have dedicated one staff member to this program, and that really is the county's commitment financially. We could probably run this portion, the administration portion of the grant without, or the program without any grant money. The difficulty would be the treatment dollars. The treatment dollars go through community mental health, and without those dollars, this program would be sunk.
The other thing that we mentioned at the meeting too is the value in different types of diversion programs, and this certainly is, you know, one diversion program. It does sound like you're limited by the diagnosis, but it is heartening to hear about some of the successes that you've had, and hopefully you can build on those with other individuals.
So how does the assessment process work then? I mean, when someone is in jail, as far as determining whether they're eligible for mental health court?
Well, community mental health, the person that's on our team from community mental health would go to the jail and do an assessment, and they would, through the findings of that assessment, determine what level mental illness that person is, and whether they meet the criteria and they're eligible for the program and want to even participate in the program. We've had several people opt not to participate in the program that were mentally ill.
That was actually my next question, like what percentage of people who would be eligible turn it down?
I don't have the exact numbers right now. I have the numbers of all the people we've assessed, but I would say approximately 20%, 20 to 30%.
Oh, okay.
And we will get better statistics on that now that we have the case manager in place, or well, we will have the case manager in place, because she will be like in contact with all of these potential defendants. She'll do an initial screening, and she'll be able to better identify whether the person has some sort of mental health issue. And then she'll, on her community mental health job side, could do the complete assessment. But it is voluntary. So she will, on the case manager side, she will explain the program to the folks and kind of make an initial determination whether they have a mental illness or not.
I guess the only thing I'd like to ask is, as you review those numbers, take a look at the numbers that the jail personnel, the officers, the booking agents are considering having mental issues. Compare that to the number of actual assessments that are being done. It's a very, very low percentage. People who are registered and, you know, documented members that have mental health issues, have been through the system before, that we can't get mental health in to do the assessments.
We can certainly work with the jail staff on that.
Please look at that, because that is a significant issue, I believe, to the group that we were with last week, wouldn't you say, Beth?
We did discuss that, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Council of Governments, Mr. Colley.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Matt McCauley. I'm the Director for Regional Planning at the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments. I'm here tonight to talk about a couple of different things. I want to give this board an update of the Grand Vision process to date, specifically information about Grand Traverse residents and their perceptions and values as it relates to the Grand Vision and the Grand Vision process. Also to provide this board some recognition from state and national organizations on their on Grand Traverse County's participation within the Grand Vision, and then finally, as a separate issue, an opportunity for Grand Traverse County to participate in a renewables and energy efficiency for local units of government program. I passed out prior to the commencement of the meeting a binder called the Grand Vision and Grand Traverse County Perspective. This is information that we've had available to the public since the spring of this year, and represents the findings from the workshops, the scorecard process, and essentially the entire public participation phase. However, when we originally presented this in the spring, it was presented in a 6-county format. And as a service to our member counties, the Council of Governments took it upon themselves to delineate that data, so we were able to present Grand Traverse County specific data to this board, and we presented the same type of information to all the participating counties within the Grand Vision process. So I won't go through this entire document page by page, but I'll quickly go through and mention what each of the tabs are. The first tab talks specific to the workshop process in the scorecard process. The workshops, we had 11 different workshops throughout the 6-county region. We had over 3,500 people participate in that workshop process. As a result of the workshop process, the consultant team created the scorecard, and that's a copy of that, of the original scorecard, is in the front of the binder. This was available in hard copy throughout the 6-county region, and also participants were able to access the scorecard on the internet on thegrandvision.org. We had over 12,000 people participate in the scorecard process throughout the 6-county region. So all in all, we had 15,000 people participate in the Grand Vision at one point or another. Of that 15,000, approximately 6,500 were stated residents of Grand Traverse County. So certainly Grand Traverse County was well represented in the process. You'll see beginning on page 13 and throughout that first section that all the questions that were asked throughout the value survey, which was a random scientific survey that was done last summer, and the scorecard process, we have the responses to both those processes in the form of the light gray bar are Grand Traverse County residents, and the black bar are the responses of the region as a whole. Generally speaking, what you'll find is that Grand Traverse County residents' responses were generally reflective of the region as a whole. So that's the first tab. And before I go to the second tab, you'll see that as you look at the responses in the scorecard results specific to the different scenarios, where there were 4 scenarios presented to the public, the first scenario being the trend scenario, scenario B being a rural by design scenario, and the third scenario, scenario C, being a village center scenario, and the final scenario that respondents had option of choosing was the city center scenario. By and large, over 50% of respondents chose the village center scenario, which focused growth and transportation networks to be built around existing cities and villages throughout the 6-county region. And again, the strong preference for that scenario was mirrored at the regional level and at Grand Traverse County level. The second tab is the values research that was done by Harris Interactive last summer, and this is a recap of the responses from the values and opinion survey that they did. Again, that was a scientifically valid survey. That was a random telephone survey throughout the 6-county region, but also provided a validity to a county level. And as part of that section, we have the responses as a region and to the county level. The third tab is from Friganesi and Associates. They were the lead consultant as it related to the public participation, and really is an executive summary and a recap of their work and findings from the workshops and the scorecard process. The fourth tab is the Public Involvement Committee report. The Public Involvement Committee was chaired by Marcia Smith of Rotary Charities. They did, in my opinion, a wonderful job in engaging the public and communicating to the public the importance of their participation throughout the project. And I think that's very much so evident in the level of participation that was received. That 15,000 number that I mentioned earlier represents 8.5% of the region's total population. That's a very significant number in terms of a percentage as it relates to other planning projects that, successful planning projects that have happened at a state level and at a national level. Many times you see successful planning projects tout 2 or 3% of a population. So for this community to have 8.5% is very commendable. This committee report talks about many of their outreach activities, how the mechanisms that the group used to reach those 15,000 people, and talked about some of the specifics within age cohorts and also geography and the different types of participants that throughout the process. The fifth tab, and I think in some ways one of the more important pieces of information that we've received to date, is from Public Policy Associates that they were hired to do another random sample telephone survey to validate the results of the scorecard process. The reason being, as all of you know, that when we released the scorecard process, that this was made available to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And there was some question whether or not through that self-selecting process, if that was indeed a true sampling of the residents of the region. So Public Policy Associates turned the scorecard essentially into a telephone survey and conducted that survey this spring. And I'm pleased to state that their findings with very few exceptions, mirrored what the information, the data that we received out of the scorecard process.
And so, Matt, was that a random sample?
Yes, it was.
It was not the people that participated in the scorecard, it was random?
Well, one question that was asked is whether or not they did participate, and there was a mix of people who did and did not participate, because it was random.
So, but it validates the fact that just the people that participated were not of one mindset or whatever. It kind of validates that the whole community had that same kind of feeling.
That's exactly correct. And again, that information is provided to a regional level, but also to a county level. If you go through that, you'll see the different demographics of the people who participated in the survey process. But again, the results are exactly that. By and large, what was received out of the random sample survey mirrored the results that we received out of the scorecard process. As another update, this just represents the public participation phase. As all of you know, this at its core is a transportation study. Currently, right now, through TC Talus, the consultant is working on further detailed analysis on 10 corridors of significance that were identified throughout this process, and they're looking to provide greater analysis and preliminary engineering to possible improvements throughout those 10 corridors of significance that would support this overall vision for growth and development in the future. We expect that the transportation component of the study will be completed by the end of this year. Right now, we are working with TC Talus, Grand Traverse County officials, and Grand Traverse County Road Commission officials about accessing the additional dollars that were made available as part of the original earmark for this for the purposes of implementation. Tomorrow, we will be meeting with Federal Highway officials, Senator Levin's office, to discuss that further.
Matt, I have a few questions. One, when we talk about the executive summary and who participated, when it talks about the 15,700 people, many of us in this room attended multiple sessions of this. I'm kind of curious what percentage of the 8% I actually count up to.
Right. The workshops, there was 3,000 people who participated in that. So we counted that by the sign-in sheets. So you shouldn't be counted more than once in the workshop process. So the additional 12,000 participants were through the scorecard process. We didn't receive, to our knowledge, people just did one scorecard.
Yeah, right.
But for the workshop process, through the sign-in sheets, we were able to remove duplicates, so we had a more accurate count.
I just know that I do know people that did multiple scorecards because they wanted certain effects to be issued. And, you know, it's kind of interesting when we see that 83% of the people were not aware of the process. You know, it is what it is.
Well, and again, your concerns about people filling out multiple scorecards, that was the reason why we did the random sample survey. And even for those, if you dig into the data a little bit deeper, for those who didn't participate in the Grand Vision but were still asked the questions, their opinions on many of these issues mirrored those who did participate in the process. So it was a way to get to as many people as we possibly could. I don't think that we'll ever be successful in getting 100% of the people, but I think that we had a good representation of the region and some very solid numbers to back that up. I would also mention that this process was unique in that there was a specific effort to reach out to young people. in that a good number of the participants were between the ages of 15 and 19. They reached out to the high schools, Traverse City West and Central, to ask them to participate in this, because much of what this was built on is what does the region look like 20, 30, maybe even 50 years from now. So asking those who will be here in the region, hopefully at that time. I just want to present to this board on behalf of the Michigan Association of Regions. This award was given at the Michigan Association of Counties conference this summer. Each of the participating counties within the Grand Vision, so again, Leelanau, Benzie, Grand Traverse, Wexford, Antrim, and Kalkaska, received a Excellence in Regional Cooperation Award for participating in the Grand Vision. And actually, right now in Savannah, Georgia, the Grand Vision in each of the participating counties are being recognized nationally for excellence in rural transportation planning. So I will have that plaque available to Grand Traverse County next week.
Good, we like awards.
Yeah, we'll fill up the trophy case.
Do we want to do the resolution on the renewable energy?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to that real quick. The Northwest Michigan Council of Governments earlier this year applied for a renewables and energy efficiency for local governments grant through the Michigan Public Service Commission. The Council of Governments, in partnership with SEEDS, which I know that Grand Traverse County and Traverse City have worked closely with on determining carbon footprint, received a 2-year grant for the purposes of procuring services and equipment to improve energy efficiency in local unit government facilities throughout our 10-county region. This project is one of 3 projects that were awarded funding throughout the state. As a result of the grant, our process will be broken up into 2 distinct phases. The first phase we will make available to each of our member counties, to the 10 county governments in our service area, up to $8,000 for a facilities audit or equivalent, and then $40,000 for the purposes of implementation of any findings to come out of an audit. That money is to be used through the use of a volunteer green energy team that we're asking each county to designate. Some of the counties that have signed on so far have designated their building and grounds committee to be the building, or to be the green energy team. That group will work with the consultant, the auditors, SEEDS, to gather data about energy use, set goals, develop action plans for making energy improvements, and communicate the results, and ultimately use that $40,000 for the purposes of implementation. Also, each participating local unit of government will be asked to establish an energy savings account where 50% of the savings that are achieved through that $40,000 in investment, 50% of that will go into an energy savings account to be used by that local unit of government for future energy efficiency improvements. The second year of the program, once we finish with county facilities, we will make available through competitive grant $40,000 to one local unit of government per each of our 10 counties, also for the purposes of energy audit or energy efficiency improvements. That'll begin next fall this time here.
I would so move. You want me to read the whole thing, or? No. Okay. On the green energy team.
Okay, fine. Been moved and supported, any discussion?
I just had a question. Matt, what was this is a 2-year award that you received?
Correct.
And what was the amount of the award?
The total award amount was $1.1 million.
Thank you.
Anything else? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Just if I can make a remark while Matt's here. This is just an example of the multiple number of things that the Council of Governments does for the participating 10 counties that, you know, we're all members. You know, the 10 counties got together and they created the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments, and it was for efficiency and for them to go in and do a regional approach and to get greater dollars to filter into the 10 counties. And, you know, so every year when we look at, you know, the issue of membership of the various associations that we belong to, this is just one example of the return we get. And our return is when Lane comes here, she tells you that, you know, it's huge. But this is just one example of, you know, the contribution that we make and the returns we get from the Council of Governments. So thank you for all your help on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, that's a heavy one. Public comment,
Matt, please.
after she reads rules.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. A, any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. B, no person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Chairperson may at his or her discretion extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
No.
My name is Jim Wiesing. I'm the County Extension Director for Michigan State University Extension, Grand Traverse County office, and I am a resident of the City of Traverse City and the County of Grand Traverse. It's with a heavy heart that I'm here. I have provided you with some information that I handed out prior to the meeting, but effectively, as it says, as many of you may have heard, funding for Michigan State University Extension is threatened by a veto from Governor Granholm for our entire state-funded budget. Now, as of last Wednesday, I did not know this, and I have been negotiating or asking for budgets, and I have been working on programs on behalf of MSU Extension Grand Traverse County office in good faith, with the full thought and understanding that our budget was intact, although supplemented by a 44% appropriation from stimulus dollars for another year. That was what we believed, and that we believe that our budget, as part of the higher education budget, will be held harmless in that manner through the rest of the year. So on that premise, it was business as usual, and we were looking at how we could in fact downsize or deliver services at a less cost in the future. However, that changed effective last Wednesday. Since MSUE has many partners in its funding, such as Grand Traverse County, the federal government, grants, contracts, fees for service, and other funding mechanisms, I thought it was important to include our partners in our contingency planning for the future of this office. Grand Traverse County is a valued and major partner. Grand Traverse County provides approximately 30% of our funding for the operation in this county. If a veto is issued, it is my intent to meet with the program areas and people in positions associated with those programs so that we may analyze the partners and funding sources to create a plan to either shut the program down immediately, which would occur in some instances, to begin a phase out of the program, or continue it in another way. All of those options, of course, are available because, as I mentioned, we have many funding partners, many sources of funding, There have been contracts signed by this Board of Commissioners, and we would have to analyze each one of those scenarios on an individual programmatic basis. Once we did that, I would come back to the Board of Commissioners and present a plan for advice and approval on how we might shut down which programs, in what manner, and how that would occur. Now, the reason this becomes rather dramatic is that we are operating from a state budget perspective on an extended budget. So therefore, we're operating under the premise that we were going to get funding as occurred last year. But as of last Wednesday, MSU Extension received their payment from the state, or MSU received their payment from the state of Michigan, and it did not include about $5 million in funding for MSU Extension, which would have been 1/12 of our payment for this coming year. So, I guess at this point, I would like to thank you for your valued partnership since 1934. And if you do that math or come into my office, and many of you or most of you have already been there, you'll see that Carl Hemstreet was the first county extension director. He came in June of 1934, and I'm the fifth, and I hope I'm not the last. I have also provided you with a fact sheet attached to this letter, and then I have also provided you a resolution that would be a resolution of support, nothing more, opposing a veto for MSU funding from the state of Michigan. And of course, you can do with that as you see fit. Now, my primary reason was to come here and advise you how I intended to handle a rather immediate and dramatic shutdown of our office. So that would be the first thing I would like to know if anyone has any questions about.
Just want to point out that Jim has been in discussion with me about how we would coordinate that and what we might do, and because we have 4.6 county employees in that department supporting the operation, and so we've had really good communication on that, and I would expect we would continue to as things develop.
Anybody got anything to say?
I know that we've already written a letter in support of MSU and not to reduce the funding for MSU extension. And therefore, I think I'd like to move that we support this resolution for the county commissioners opposing the veto of MSU and MAES's funding for the state.
I'll second that. We were going to do it under Dennis's section, but that's okay. We can do it.
Oh, that's why Jim can leave.
Yeah. Then moved and supported. Sonny.
Jim, I guess my questions have to do with the fact that we last month committed funds for the 0 to 3 program, and in our consent calendar this evening is some funding for the Safe Kids program. If this in fact happens, I'm assuming that funding will not be needed, or what happens with those commitments of funds that Grand Traverse County has made? Because obviously you don't have the other funding that goes with it.
That's an excellent question, Sonny, and that's the kind of analysis that we're going to have to go through for each program and each group of personnel to determine what funding MSU, Michigan State University, has in the program. And I guess that the simple answer is that if Michigan State University has no funding in a program, for example, if it were a 100% county-funded program that did not require MSU per se, then there's a possibility that those programs could be continued. But that's the kind of analysis we're going to have to go through on a program-by-program basis.
There might be a program that has a 2-year grant that Jim received, and we're 6 months into it, that came completely from somebody different, and we've got contractual relationships with them, we've got commitments with them, and so that every one of those programs are going to have to be evaluated to see what responsibilities we have, what funding might come from MSU or from you. Of course, and I'm anxious to see that if we get to that point, because one of the big questions is, well, if part of a program is funded through a grant, part of it's funded through the county, part of it's funded through MSU, and we lose the MSU money, but we still have a commitment for a grant to run a program for the next 10 months,
And that's what
Yeah,
Jim
we-
pointed out to me. We're gonna have to look at every aspect of that to see what our responsibility is.
Well, and the other piece of that is when we made commitments for the 03 program, for example, I believe it's $65,000. That was basically gap financing to get us through December 31st of this year, knowing that the state budget was October 1,
Yes.
you know.
With respect to the 0 and 3 grant, what we believe has happened is that that funding has been moved through the bills and will perhaps be reinstated. But the new twist to it is, of course, if MSUE is not there to supervise the program, can it in fact continue? And then the last part of that is with respect to those, because that is a contractual grant. Now, if you remember, the state of Michigan withdrew that with 30 days written notice. In many of the grants, the county has a similar option, if you were the signator or the fiduciary to the grant, with written notice to cancel also from your side. So that's why I say there are options all the way through this.
Chris?
What I have to say, Jim, actually has nothing to do with your resolution. I want you to know I support it. What I'm having a problem with is we have public comment, and we are having a discussion during public comment. We're making resolutions during public comment, which I think are inappropriate. I think resolutions need to be added to approval of the agenda or under the administrator's support. This is public comment, and I really think that that's what we should concentrate on. I have absolutely no problem with adding the resolution to the agenda when we get to approval of the agenda.
We already added it.
We added it.
Well, we'll be talking about that under new business, but,
Okay.
because I have a little blurb there, but that's really my 2 cents.
So we'll be talking about it under Dennis's report. Why don't we hold on the motion?
All right, I was all,
So we have we have it under the administrator's report? Is that what we have it under?
That's where we put it before.
All right, okay.
That's true.
All right,
That's fine.
Jim, just real quickly, since you're doing this under public comment, I think it would be helpful to the commissioners if you could identify the employees, the MSU employees, so that they can put a name, with a person that might be at risk here. Is that okay to do or not? Are you comfortable with that?
I would be more comfortable telling you what the positions are.
That would be great.
Sure, because people can change the positions or what have endured. Grand Traverse County provides funding for an office manager.
No, I want you to talk about who might no longer be there if you lose the MSUE
Oh, the
funding.
MSUE, okay.
That's what I want them to
Okay.
understand.
The MSUE funding. Michigan State University provides funding for an agricultural agent, and that person is an entomologist and works with the grape industry and the cherry growers, and does the Master Gardener program and provides the home horticulture work for citizens who come into the office with insect disease and plants and so on. Another position is one in family and consumer science, and that person oversees the Parents as Teachers program, oversees the family nutrition program, the Safe Kids program, those kinds of activities. Another major program area is 4-H, and the 4-H program has actually 2 people now, because we have looked at our funding in a little bit different way, but those people oversee the entire 4-H program, probably a couple of hundred volunteers and about 1,000 children in the 4-H program. Another area is the groundwater stewardship program. This person looks at the whole concept of reducing groundwater pollution, well closures, all of those kinds of things associated with protecting our groundwater and our environment. And one of the last people that's strictly MSU funded is a person who looks at the coastal issues, Sea Grant, invasive species, and all of those programs. Those are the major on-site MSUE employees. Now, I forgot one, myself. Although I said I was the county extension director, programmatically, 70% of my responsibility is in the area of community and economic development and planning. And I do a lot of work with probably every agency, organization, and governmental entity in the region. So those are the direct MSU employees.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? If not, I'll close public hearing. We'll go to the consent calendar.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. Receive and file. 1, letter from City of Traverse City dated October 20th, 2009 regarding shared operations. 2, Berry County resolution requesting adoption of fertilizer ban. 3, Charlevoix and Lake County resolution supporting agriculture as a standalone department. 4, Lake County resolution supporting the continuation of the state fair. 5, Oceana County resolution supporting Oceana County Sheriff's opposition to current lien funding formula. 6, Van Buren County resolution supporting tourism. 7, Oceana County letter of September 15, 2009 to the governor regarding the Michigan Department of Agriculture. Referrals, none. Action, 8, board minutes for regular session of September 30, 2009, recommend approval. 9, board minutes of special session of October 2, 2009, recommend approval. 10, board minutes of special meeting of October 13, 2009, recommend approval. Public Safety Committee recommends approval of the following resolutions. 11, Grand Traverse Sheriff's Office surplus vehicles. 12, fiscal year 2009 State Criminal Alien Assistance Program Award. 13, Carlin Radio Tower option and lease. Human Services Committee recommends approval of the following resolutions. 14, Medical Directive Services Agreement. 15, Animal Control Division Shelter Cleaning Contract. 16, CPBC Agreement. Legislation and Administration Committee recommends approval of the following resolutions. 17, Circuit Court Staffing Plan Amendment. Physical Resources Committee recommends approval of the following resolution. 18, Snow Removal Services. 19, Twin Lakes Access to Recreation Change Order Number 1. 20, Twin Lakes Access to Recreation Change Order Number 2. Change Request Number 6. Ways and Means Committee recommends approval of the following resolutions. 21, approval of funding for Safe Kids Program. 22, reconsideration of Siegel implementation. 23, 2010 budget adoption and general appropriation act. 24, health, vision, and dental insurance. 25, budget adjustments. 26, software for mobile data terminals. 27, fiscal year 2009-2010 CPBC amendment number 1. 28, emergency management performance grant. 29, multi-jurisdiction, multi-purpose grant proposal with the City of Traverse City. 30, LED demonstration grant proposal with the Traverse City Light and Power. 31, approval of 2010 apportionment report. And 32, increased number of road commissioners from 3 to 5.
Is there anybody in the public who would like to have anything taken off the consent calendar? How about the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we remove item number 1 and item number 32, please.
32, you said?
Yes.
Number 23 and number 24, please.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item number 1, item 23, item 24, and item number 32.
Support. Moved, supported.
Can we add a number? Will you amend that to add 22?
Sure. And amend to 22.
26.
Support.
22.
22. Okay. By roll call vote?
Commissioner Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes. Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item is, as I promised you, an update as to the progress I'm making on my 2009 primary goals and objectives. That's for your consideration. I understand that, and I also included in that packet the information I provided you, I think in September, which would give you some idea of a possible process for evaluation for my position as required under my contract. So I'm providing that information to you. This is the time of the year to do an evaluation. And that's just for information unless there's any questions.
Dennis, I have one question. In regard to the continue to manage the Human Resources Department, at one time we had a discussion about whether it was appropriate that we start looking for a headhunter to hire someone for that position. Are we thinking that we have exhausted our abilities to get qualified candidates, and maybe we should reconsider that? You know, we've been, what now, close to a year, maybe over a year?
More than a year.
Over a year
Yep.
without a Human Resources Director?
Yeah.
You know, negotiating all the labor contracts we have, I have to believe it becomes a very burden on your schedule.
Yeah. I would ask the board's indulgence to give me 4 more weeks till November. I think there's a real good chance that we'll have someone hired in that period of time. We've done 3 more interviews in the last 3 weeks, and with the team that I established, and we're in the process of discussing that and I had a meeting with HR staff today to go over those 3. There's a very good possibility that I'll have somebody to be appointed to this position here in the next few weeks.
Okay, that's a good question, follow-up question on that. How many individuals did you say you were looking at right now?
3.
3. What were the, roughly, and I realize you don't have this in front of you, roughly the time that they made application for this position?
One made an application for the position probably, well, I don't know for sure, 6 months ago.
Okay.
The other one probably made an application for the position in the second round of applications, which was probably 8 months ago.
Okay.
And the third one made application about 3 weeks ago. Maybe 5 weeks ago, I should say now.
Okay. Because what I'm kind of thinking is, you know, they've applied some considerable amount of time ago, and I would think that if they fit specifically into the criteria that you were looking for, then probably we would have moved forward by this point. So I'm just...
That's correct.
You know, I'm thinking that perhaps maybe we should move forward with the idea of a headhunter to make sure that, you know, we are maybe able to search and find someone maybe a little bit more tailored to this position.
Well, my opinion, we've had this discussion. My opinion on this, let me say there were a couple things. First of all, when we talked about a headhunter, the board approved that. It was not unanimous. Some commissioners had some concerns about using a headhunter. We have actually talked with a headhunter. And right now, let me tell you what let me say that we've come to the conclusion that it's highly unlikely we're going to find somebody with all the attributes we were looking for. So we've kind of modified our criteria. But to be sure that there's not somebody else out there, we just had a meeting with HR staff today. The headhunter that we feel is most appropriate to use, and we've talked to, I think, 4 or 5, we're going to call them tomorrow and see if they would be willing, just as a test, to provide us with 3 or 4 names, or excuse me, 3 or 4 applications without names, addresses, and phone numbers, so we can look at the quality of the type of applicants that they think would fit. We've already had discussions with them. I've talked with them on the phone. And I guess we're going to do that as a test. This is kind of our plan. If we get these applications and they look significantly better or have more of the attributes that we're looking for, then I would come back to you and say, we think it's worth hiring the headhunter. If they don't, then I don't see any reason to continue the process on, and we'll likely make a recommendation of one of the current candidates.
Okay, that sounds like a fair way to do it. I'd also like to consider perhaps when you take that step in dealing with the headhunter and reviewing those applications, you know, without a name, that perhaps we have maybe a little bit of maybe an ad hoc, you know, two commissioners maybe willing to kind of sit in on that and you know, go through that process as well to review those and perhaps take action on them or recommend that we come back and maybe make some type of movement on the applicants you currently have.
I'm sorry, I want to be clear on that.
So I'm asking, I guess, the other commissioners if they would see any value in maybe having a small, very small, subcommittee to kind of review that option with the headhunter and some applications as well.
Do we want to see, like you said, give them 4 weeks and see how it goes first?
That's how I would like to proceed.
I apologize for this. They're doing electrical work. Dean's going to go ask them to stop.
It would seem to me that committee should be the L&A committee.
Well, I believe that this board has established that the responsibility of appointing department heads is Dennis's job.
That's true.
That's what my position.
I do have a concern, Dennis, that we're not moving forward. And if it would help you at all to have 3 commissioners, I mean, if you've decided that the 3 applicants won't work, we may need to use a headhunter, I guess what I'm saying is if this board can help move this process forward, then I'm fine with it. Looking at applications without names, addresses, phone numbers, I don't care, but I really do, I guess what I want to stress, we need someone in charge of HR. We need an HR department head, in my opinion. And I guess I would be willing to do whatever I can do to move the process forward.
Well, I did have an opportunity to talk to a couple of commissioners who happen to be in the office, and I kind of bounced these candidates, not without names, without resumes, off of them to get some input from the commissioners. And I think I got some good insight, at least from those 2 commissioners, about how they feel about the candidates. So I'm pretty comfortable that unless I find something in the test with the headhunter, that I'll be making a recommendation here within a couple of weeks.
Dennis, I just want you to know I absolutely believe that this appointment is yours. All I am saying is if I as an individual can be of any assistance in that process, feel free to call.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I guess that's exactly the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah.
And apparently this has been a difficult search, obviously. I mean, we've talked about it's been difficult because Grand Traverse County has 13 unions, and there's some HR people who maybe don't want to dip their toe in that pond. There's also, we've talked about the difficulty finding someone with a municipal background. The people tend to be less transient now and have difficulty selling their homes.
Because of the economy.
Right, because of the economy. And so I agree with Sonny in that's at your discretion, but I also acknowledge that this has been a difficult one to fill and a difficult one to address. And I guess that's what I was offering was
I guess to summarize, I would say that those are both 2 very valid reasons why we're having difficulty. And the third that's probably at least as equal, maybe more, is the fact that we don't pay competitive salary to be competitive with the people that have the qualifications that I've been looking for. So those 3 things combined have made it very difficult. Now that there's been a decision made about where the salaries will be and that we won't be addressing the Siegel thing anymore, it's clear to me. So what we're basically doing is we're changing our approach to what qualifications we think it's reasonable to be able to expect for what we pay. And that's what we're doing, and we'll take a different approach, and it may require more training, more hand-holding, those kinds of things. But as long as we go into it knowing that, what we're expecting and what we're getting, that's what we will be successful.
The last thing I'll say, and then I'll give up the floor, is that given the fact that obviously, I mean, Sonny brought this up, but obviously that we all are anxious to have an HR director in place, I wouldn't let the timing of having to go through, like, if you contact a headhunter and you get some applications that look pretty good, I wouldn't let the timing of taking the time to, go through that headhunter and interview those people delay or not have you use the headhunter rather just take one of these people because of the timing of it.
Well, no, of course not. If I thought there was a value to using the headhunter, I would definitely do that. But in fact, I believe, Commissioner, you were the one who raised the issue of we'd like to see some of the headhunters that you're considering when we talked about this. I believe you said that, and you wanted to have some review of the headhunters. And in fact, you're correct in that if it's a contract, it'll be the county board who has to approve a contract, and no headhunter is likely to give us viable candidates without a contract in place that says they're going to get paid if we hire one of them. And remember, the rates were between, I think we said 20 and 25%. And I'm pretty sure if you go back and look, that was what was expressed by the board. We want to see those before you hire one. So there will be a delay, and that's why we came up with this idea today. Sally's in the audience. We had a discussion about this in HR, and we came up with this idea of trying to test the headhunter market first. And if we're able to do that, we'll have a pretty good idea whether there's anything that is viable out there. And if we will, I definitely will be back to you right away saying let's use that option.
Dennis, I might not remember this correctly. It's happened before, and I'm sure it'll happen again. But didn't the board give you some leeway in the salary where you didn't have to?
No. No, and you know what, frankly, I wouldn't accept any leeway in the salary, because how could I justify paying something more to that position than any other position? It would be, we would have to go back through the mechanism of a market adjustment to the present wage and salary system, which is a whole other process through LNA. So no, the board, I mean, there is leeway. We have the leeway of the range of the salary under the old system, and we don't always have to hire in at the first step based on experience. So we have that leeway.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, oh, yes, we do have other things, of course. But on that issue, though, on that issue, I just want to yeah, all right, thank you. On that issue, I just want to remind the board chair, one of the things that I've done is I've written a letter to the board chair. I think you may have it today, asking for the board's indulgence in reevaluating my contract with you. We're coming to the end of a year, and I would expect we have to do an evaluation first, but I would like to have a discussion with the board, and I think the chairman may have some ideas on how he wants to handle that.
Well, yeah, I would like to form a committee to do that, and that committee would be comprised of vice chairman, chairman of LNA, and Mr. Stepka has agreed to sit on that.
Would you also serve on that?
Huh?
Or would you also serve on that?
Me too.
Oh, okay.
I thought that went with the
So-
territory. So.
Question on that. So the purpose is just to gather information, meet with Dennis and just go over his contract and bring his suggestions back to the board?
Go over his contract, because he would like to have it reviewed for
Okay.
one thing.
So we would just field the questions and review his contract and bring back the issues he would like to present with.
I'd like Mr. Stepka, because he's an expert on contracts.
Okay.
If that's okay with the rest of the board.
Absolutely.
All right, sounds good.
That's fine. I hereby appoint us.
And then I believe also in regards to that, you've provided all the commissioners? Okay.
Yep.
With an evaluation form?
We have that?
No.
It's in there, it was on the desk today.
LNA.
He came in.
Oh, it's Larry, please.
Are you ready?
Vice Chair, Chairman LNA.
Dennis, may I just ask a quick question in regard to the subcommittee that the chairman just appointed? Because we're reviewing a labor contract with you, if the board chairman appoints a committee, we ran into this once before, then all of the meetings of that subcommittee are public?
That's correct.
Now, because this is a issue with an employee's contract, you would have to choose to ask those to be private sessions?
No.
Or you don't want to do that?
Well, you
I'm trying to
can't.
remember just how that works.
You can't. These are, it's a committee appointed by the board. The contract has to be talked about in public. I only have the ability to request it on performance evaluation and discussion of performance. I do have the ability to go into a closed session on that at my request, especially if it deals with discipline or other issues. but not in terms of the contract. That has to be done
Not
in
in
public.
regard to contract.
That's correct.
I
We'll
know
have to
there was
post
part
the
of that
meeting.
labor thing that we couldn't deal with.
Yep, we'll have to post the meetings.
Okay.
Ready to move on? The next item is the road commission issue, which is also one of the items I think one of the commissioners pulled, the 3 to 5 members. And what I have here is several commissioners asked questions of our attorney, Mr. Cooney, and I put the information from Mr. Cooney in here. Several of you, there's also some additional information from him on your desks that was provided you in an email a couple days ago, but we made additional copies. He talks about the terms of the road commissioners, and he can answer further questions. We've included on page 10 the current terms of the current road commissioners, and that's there for information and anything further you want to discuss about it.
What's that?
Everybody happy?
Okay. The next item is the revised multifunctional copier bids, and Dean is going to handle this item.
Just a couple of quick comments. The bids that were requested were reviewed by Don Sheehan, Carol Stocking, Brenda Miller-Goki, Katie, Sarah Adams, and myself. Probably just pointing out the third paragraph up from the bottom. We're actually recommending, if you look at page 13 under the administrators section, the machines in the second column that are highlighted in gray, I am recommending that we purchase the machines versus lease. The savings on the first machine for district court is $471 versus the leasing option. The maintenance costs under either scenario are the same. The savings are more significant under the copier for sheriff admin. That totals $2,694. So the total savings to purchase versus lease for both machines is $3,160, and the funds are available in our central services internal service fund to make these purchases. The recommendation is on the back of the write-up. We're recommending for district court the machine from Icon, and then for the sheriff administration office, a machine from Northern Office Equipment.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to purchase the copiers as outlined and explained by the finance director and recommended.
Is there support?
I'll support.
Been moved and supported. Discussion? By roll call vote?
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Stepka?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Oh, sure.
The next item is, you asked me to get you some additional information about the allocation of funds for the septic treatment plant investigation. I've enclosed the minutes of the various meetings where the board took action on this, and they're there for your review. It appears that the latest action was the June 30th action, and you can see there the results of that. And I hope that gives you the clarification you need to address that issue. My understanding, and several commissioners were at the meeting on Monday, the Board of Public Works meeting. My understanding is, and Mr. Kelly, the supervisor from Elmwood, provided information, I think, from minutes of the meetings from the very beginning, and I think his contention was that from the beginning, that the Sewer and Water Committee had talked about the allocation, their allocation coming out of the septic treatment fund. I'm not making any judgment on that, but that was kind of what the minutes, I believe, showed. Several commissioners were there and may want to speak to that. But my understanding is that's their intention, is that their money should come out of this, that their money will come out of the septic treatment fund, their portion of the project. And my understanding is also that yours was up to $10,000, a commitment from your general fund.
Back at Board of Public Works, I voted to continue this investigation. I've been resisting it from the beginning because of this cost and the cost escalation. However, it's obvious that the investigation is going forward. I think it's time now to move it forward. And if we start this now, we can have this investigation probably completed by the end of the year, and we have some answers, and we'll understand what's going on. And I think it'll be good to resolve it, and I think that we should follow through with our commitment.
I agree, the funding's in place, let's just move on.
Larry?
Although I am not particularly happy that the 5 townships didn't really come together as a whole and say they were going to fund the $10,000 out of something other than the septic treatment fund. I think it's important for the process to go through. The Board of Public Works did, under public comment, ask them to clarify the action they took, and they felt it was clear that if the Board of Commissioners did reverse the $10,000, because if it was I tried to indicate to them that I thought the motion was more of a challenge, that if we put 10 in, they would put 10 in. But they indicated that that their motion would clear the full 20,000 if we did decide to withdraw our 10. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear, so we weren't going to delay this thing another month. But, you know, to be honest with you, I just soon, at this point in time, not challenge the situation. I just soon pay the 10, show our good faith to the community and to the public that we're willing to put our best foot forward and put a little bit of money towards this thing, because it does show a level of support for resolving the issue of liability. And let's just let the process go.
What bothers me about this is that the 5 townships haven't put a nickel into that plant yet. Now they want to use the plant's money to find out whose fault everything is.
Chairman, I would agree with you. That's correct. Of course, as I've said several times in the past, if you absolutely want to make the townships pony up some money, then you stop paying for their bond payment, which is, I think the next one's going to take place in 3 days from now. However, of course, we already voted to give them a blank check up to $500,000, so I guess they're not feeling too much of a shortage of cash. Having said all that, I do believe that we need to have the investigation to, first of all, to make sure that, we got everything out of this contract, or the county got everything out of this contract that they should have gotten when that septic plant was put into operation. And because the public itself, I think, has many, many questions about it. And certainly, since there is another arm of this is moving forward, talking about the possibility of some sort of a special assessment on everybody with a septic tank in this county, I think we need to point out, show them that we've exhausted every other possibility of funds before we do something like that. So hopefully this can move forward.
On a more positive note, Chuck Corrin did pull me aside after the Board of Public Works meeting and indicated that his board would allocate money if asked. And Acme Township, Wayne Clatter, said he felt uncomfortable about making that commitment at that sewer and water meeting when they made that recommendation, because he had not yet had a chance to engage his board on a resolution for the dollar amount, and he feels that that Acme would be supportive of contributing. So, that left me with a little bit better feeling that, there are some of the townships that are involved in this thing that do feel that, they have maybe some sort of an obligation to help us with this thing. But for now, I just soon let the process go through. If they want to pass resolutions and kick money in, that's a later date.
Do we have a motion?
No, we do not.
So
I'll make one.
We don't have one, just move on.
I think just let it go.
Well, okay.
We don't need a motion?
We don't need one.
Okay.
You're right.
We already took action.
Yep.
The next item is one that you asked me to, or I'm bringing back to remind you. We're going to be getting 2% applications very soon. I did not hear from any county commissioners about suggestions for criteria, so I took the liberty of drafting some criteria for you to consider. And you can change this, of course, any way you want. I passed this out to you today. I've put together a timeline with Chris Kramer's help and with Katie Loran's help of when we think we can get this done. Remember, the applications will be due, and your decisions on recommendations have to be done by the end of the year. So I passed this out to you. It's a 3-page document. It was, I hope you can all find it.
Yeah.
It's titled 2% Grant Funding Evaluation. So the timeline I'm suggesting here would be that applications would be due by Monday, November 30th. The applications would be distributed to the Legislative and Administration Committee members for evaluation. Now, that was just some arbitrary committee I came up with. If you want to set a special committee or you want the whole board to do it, I just did it with LNA simply because they are used to an interview process. I'm seeing all the commissioners that aren't, are going.
That are not on LNA nodding yes.
So that'll be up to you. And I might suggest to you that you have the meeting of LNA in November to kind of refine this, work through this the way you want to. And then we're saying LNA or whoever in the first part of December could meet with applicants if necessary, review the applications, make a recommendation by the 15th. The county board could consider it at your board meeting on the 23rd of December, and we'd have time to get the applications to the tribe by the 30th. If you look at page 2, this is just a suggestion. I went to several websites and looked at what might be some reasonable criteria. You can modify this any way you want, of course. We just put a grant kind of form together, and our intention would be, once you decide on the criteria, we'd send it out to all the applicants so they kind of see what's important to you. I came up with these things. How the application engages the community, involves the community, how the application addresses the community's needs, the demonstrated impact that the grant request will have on the community, any evidence of innovation, trying to do things differently, any evidence of collaboration, a demonstrated need, of course, for the community, the Grand Traverse County population served, evidence of a long-term funding plan. In other words, we're going to give you the seed money, but we've got these ideas on how we're going to continue to keep this program going if it's a continuation program. Of course, alignment with the county's mission and vision. I put that in there. And then a demonstrated ability to account for the funds, which makes Dean happy always, since we're going to have a contractual obligation. So these are just some thoughts for you to consider. But time is running very short, and I just wanted to give you something to begin thinking.
And that's the end of your report.
Actually, there's going to be a few more things, but you have a question.
Yeah, Dick's out here.
Well, I guess first I want to thank Dennis for the work he's done on providing this way by which we rank these. The obvious, I've been pretty verbal for a long time about the fact that all of these applications come in and the tribe asks us to sanction them without giving us any opportunity to rank them or to prioritize them or anything else. So in the past, we've rubber stamped them and sent them all of them. My obvious concern is, are we still sending them all of them, only now they have a point value, or we're going to pick out the top 10 applications and make those?
That'll be up to you. I think it's more, that'll be up to you. I mean, in the best of all worlds, when this process is refined, my suggestion is you send a limited number of applications in, and they would be the ones that you're willing to hold the money in contract for. But that's a board decision. You can send them all and just give them priority ranking, whatever you decide to do. Leelanau County does not send them all in.
How many applications do we usually get per cycle?
It varies, Commissioner, but I would say in the last 6 or 8 years, it's varied from 15 to 40.
Okay, so if you were talking about the possibility of all of these 20, 30, or 40 making presentations to LNA?
Well, and that's what I think.
Yeah,
a
long meeting. That was that power committee you were talking
about. That's what I think you have to. That's what I think you have to think about. Obviously, if they do a good job putting their applications together, whoever the committee is, could review all the applications and rank them and say, we're going to interview the top 10.
list.
And then collect them and just interview 10 or 5 or whatever you decide. So you'll have to decide that. But yep, and we don't interview. We have not interviewed in the past, have we? The very first couple of years that I was here, they would come in and make presentations to you, but that took a long time, and so there was a quick end to that.
Well, but even though that process was taking place, there was still no way for us to prioritize them or rank them. The tribe still got them all, so there was no sense in our spending our time to do that.
And understand, the criteria I put together is your criteria. It's not necessarily the tribe's criteria.
Dennis, I was asked by Kiwanis if they could be notified when these applications were due. Could you, by any chance, have your staff send a letter to Dr. Dan Saria? He's the president of Kiwanis. They have a dictionary program that they fund for grade school children.
Yep.
And they were interested in applying for grant money.
One of the things that will be a little bit trying this year, and we're thinking about an ad in the paper, but, you know, people will not understand our new process. Remember, the tribe sprung a new process on us a week before the deadline in June. So what we're doing is we're trying to figure out a way to do that. We're going to go through all our applications that we had for the last 8 years at least, and we're going to make up a mailing list, and once you decide on the criteria, we're going to send the notice to everybody with the new timeline so they know that they have to have applications in. But that's the best we can do. There may be others out there that we don't know about. For example, Kiwanis may never have made an application. So if you know anybody else, we'll send them a notice too.
Thank you.
We always get applications after we approve it at Ways and Means. We get applications at the board meeting the week later.
Yeah, and I think that's something you're going to have to kind of work through this time, but in the future, you're going to have to draw some, limits on it and say, by the deadline or it's not being considered. I mean, it'll just make your job more manageable, I think.
Too, there's some people who have some massive email addresses, like Barb Lemkel with the Community Collaborative. When she sends something out, I think it hits 3/4 of the county.
That's true.
It's the top third of the state.
I'd be glad to send it to Barb and ask her if she could, distribute that as well, of course.
Is this process, Dennis, a means for us to recommend what the tribe basically, we send the recommendation back to the tribe, and then they have the final say in
Yes.
in who they distribute the money to?
Yeah, under the current compact, those in the 1993 compact, the tribes still have control of making the decisions on the money. Those in the 1996 compact, that money, like Manistee County, for example, that money all goes to the county, and the county has a committee. I think in Manistee, it's a city member, a county member, and one other member at large, and they decide how the money is distributed. But we're still under the old compact, and under that compact, the tribe decides. So the option you have is to make recommendations.
Okay.
Everybody happy?
Mr. Chairman, there are a couple more quick things.
Keep going.
Okay. First, I wanted to make a clarification for you. After we talked with you last month about this special allowance for the swine flu clinics, which, we had a very successful one on Saturday and Sunday, about paying our employees to do the work. The motion that you passed said straight time, and that was what I asked you to do. And after talking with the HR department and our attorney, Ron Sundee, it became obvious to Dean and I that under our contractual obligation, those people that are in unions that work are going to have to be paid time and a half, not straight time. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention, see if you had a problem with that. It was something we overlooked. Now, every other employee that works on it, management or whoever else that does it, that would still be at straight time. But that's a clarification I needed to make because you had a lot of discussion about it last meeting. And if there's an issue with it, I need to know it now. That's how we would intend to pay.
Quick question, if I'm following that. If you have staff that's not in a union.
Right.
And they are not management, seems to me we're going to get back to the level of fairness. If you're going to pay one group pay time and a half, shouldn't you pay everybody time and a half that's involved in the process?
Issue, without getting into a great deal of detail, but I will get into as much as you want, under the FLA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, there is some provision for certain classifications, such as nurses, and sanitarians and others to be exempt. And in fact, we classify them as exempt.
Oh, then that's fine.
But what we're hearing is, from our labor attorney, is that those are being challenged regularly and being lost regularly. And so his advice to us was to pay the union employees at the time and a half rate. And we're evaluating it in terms of the whole program. But for this swine flu program, he advised us to go ahead and pay them at time and a half. Anybody who's not in the union, of course, would just be straight time. So if that's problematic, I need to know it, because we had clinics Saturday and Sunday. We have more clinics scheduled. The only thing that has made us not have clinics this week is we haven't gotten any more vaccine. We still have less than 2,000 doses. I think right now we only have about 119 doses left.
Well, I guess
So more is
as a
delivered.
follow-up, my issue is not someone that is salary, but somebody that is hourly. And do we have anybody over there hourly doing this thing?
Lots of people hourly.
And they're getting straight
The
pay.
contract, didn't we contract other nurses, non-county employees?
Yes.
And those will be being paid at straight time?
Yeah, well, they're at a contract rate, which is less. Yeah, that's right. But the problem becomes, and you might be thinking, well, why don't we just use contract employees? Well, our contracts require us to offer the work to our employees first. So we have a contractual obligation there, and we worked out an agreement with them whereby during regular hours, when they have other responsibilities, we'll use contract people, or if they're not available, we'll use contract people. But we've had to put regular sign-up sheets for all the clinics, and any union employees that are eligible and qualified, they get first shot at doing this work.
So do you need a motion to be consistent?
I don't think I do unless the board feels necessary, as long as you understand that that's what we'll be doing. Union people will pay a time and a half, non-union people will be straight time.
Russ?
Is this going to create any funding problems?
Fred's analyzed it, and we don't believe it will. I will just mention this to you. This is not taking place now, but one of the things that we're contemplating, we've talked with the chair and the vice chair, is there may be a time here in the near future where we will look to declare a local emergency. Now, that is not to declare a local emergency because of the swine flu epidemic. It is to declare a local emergency to make us eligible for any reimbursement of federal or state funding that may come down the road if this thing expands. So it's kind of a threshold you have to meet. You cannot meet it until you've exhausted most of your revenue. So there may be a time when we do that, but right now Fred is not anticipating any problem. And quite frankly, this is all being held up by not having vaccine. And that's our big problem. And I understand the hospital did not even get the vaccine to vaccinate their healthcare workers. So right now as I speak, there may be more delivered today that I don't know about. But as of talking with Fred this morning, we were waiting for vaccine. Okay?
Yep.
All right, the next one is the one you requested, Mr. Chairman, the MSU extension. Did we vote it?
No,
we waited for this.
No.
So now it's time.
Yeah, I would move that we accept forward this recommendation to resist the veto of MSUE and MAES funding from the state.
Could you change resist to oppose?
To oppose, okay, opposing the veto.
I'll second that.
Yep.
Moved and supported. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And lastly, Mr. Chairman, we passed it out, but it was inadvertently left off the agenda. Claims and accounts was not listed there, but you've all received a copy of the claims, and I'll turn that over to Dean, if you're willing to consider that. Otherwise, we can wait till next month.
Before we do that,
Let's pay it.
I did have a question or two for Jim, when he was giving public comment,
Yep.
and then we stopped doing public comment, so, yeah. If you don't mind, Jim.
I'd be happy to respond.
What I was curious is if there are contracts that you operate under that come directly to, your office here in Traverse City, rather than through the MSUE office in Lansing.
You don't want to be...
Yes, we do have contracts that come to Grand Traverse County exclusively. And when we have those contracts, we have come to the Board of Commissioners and we have asked permission to apply for those grants and contracts. And then when we have been awarded them, we have brought them to the board for signatures by the board chair. Many of you have signed contracts, so yes.
So, not to put the worst case on it, although it's certainly possible, if the veto happens, then you would be trying to figure out what amount of funding you could continue on with without the state funding, and there would be some contracts and grants plus the money that we provide, correct?
Yes, really the issue is, once again, we have a longstanding valued partnership with the county. And in that partnership with the county, you have become the fiduciary and have accepted many grants and contracts where you are the signator, not MSU Extension, or it's a combination of MSU Extension, Grand Traverse County Office. And we're going to have to sort our way through those rather than just assume that we can just repudiate everything.
Right.
I'm sure Bob would not be happy if we did that, or anyone else in the state. So I think it's going to require a careful analysis and review of contracts, of personnel situations. As Dennis asked, we have about 8 MSU personnel, we have county personnel, and we have grant-funded personnel. So we have a variety of employment situations, even a couple of federal employees. And we will have to carefully evaluate all of that. And then hopefully we can come back and say this is what we think a plan of action would be, a reasonable plan of action would be to shut down MSU Extension, Grand Traverse County.
Okay, or possibly continue it in some fashion under
it could include
funding.
continuing some things, possibly if you chose to do that, and if there was no state money in them or supervision.
It wouldn't be called MSUE anymore.
Pardon me?
I said it wouldn't be called MSUE anymore.
No, it would not be called MSUE anymore. But you could choose to do some of that if you chose to, if you as a board wanted to do that. And then you would have to decide how those contracts would be supervised and how those employees would be, where they would be housed and.
One of the things I would expect that Jim will do is as he reviews all this, he will look at the resource allocation that the county puts to that program and see how it might be reallocated in a way to supplement whatever money's left to manage or continue some program. I think is that fair, Jim?
That's possible, yes.
We'll look at that option first and then bring that to you with a series of possibilities.
My main interest was encouraging that process to see, again, in the worst case scenario, what could be salvaged and, what we could continue, because obviously you're running some very, very valuable programs over there that I think I'll be very sad to see go away.
Thank you. Fact of the matter is, MSU Extension is pretty much one of the sole providers of research and education to agriculture, a $71 billion industry in Michigan. Yeah. And we have been hearing from the farmers and from the vineyards and from the orchards a great cry of outrage. One interesting fact also is that we would be the only state in the nation not to have an extension service associated with the land-grant university. I don't think that's something we would want to be remembered for. So there are a lot of things involved in this. It's not very simple, even at this level, at the county office level. It's very complex. So I just wanted you to know. I wanted to share all of this with you. It is a reality. I'm not just. This is not a ploy of any kind. This is what we believe is going to happen.
Having been involved in a multitude of programs that are sponsored by MSU Extension in this community, I'm very concerned about this process, like everyone else. And I'm sure without question I know Jim well enough that he is currently compiling a list of every program that he has and how many people that program affects and the dollar amounts. And if in fact this money goes away from the state of Michigan, there are going to be very, very tough decisions to be made in these programs in this community, because some of these programs are very critical to the betterment of this community.
I appreciate your 75 years of support, because that's how long you have been a partner with MSU Extension. I appreciate the resolution in support opposing the veto. And ultimately, if it comes to pass, then I will be back with a resolution to support an override of the veto. However, that's just one of the many steps that we will try to take.
Jim, I have a quick question for you. You mentioned the agriculture education and resource. Are those programs primarily through the state funding, or what's the breakout with those?
The Michigan State University Extension Office is an example of that. In MSU, in this office, about 30% of the funding for the agricultural program comes from Grand Traverse County, because the Grand Traverse County provides office space and support staff. The person in charge of it, Dr. Elsner, I'll use his name, is paid by MSU, and then we get programmatic support. So it's about 30% Grand Traverse County, about 30% state, another 20% roughly federal, and then another 20% in grants. And every program has its own mix of those things. The problem we run into with respect to agriculture is 100% of the agricultural agent's salary is provided by MSU. So in many instances, those are the problems with the program. The leadership goes away, or the expertise goes away.
And all the funding for the local horticultural research.
And that's a whole different issue. We have the horticultural research station. That's a different scenario. I just gave you the Grand Traverse County office and the agricultural program in our office.
Thank you.
Jim, who would you suggest we send that resolution to?
The governor.
The governor, our senator, our state rep, and Michigan Association of Counties, anybody else? Or
I would suggest that you forward that to our House, our Senate, and our governor, respectively, our representatives. And I, too, will forward a copy to Michigan State University Extension Director so that he can have a copy of it.
Okay, and we'll send one to Michigan Association of Counties.
And Michigan Association of Counties would be another good one.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Chairman, I would move to add the statutory finance report, because we'll have to approve that by 2/3 vote in order to add it to the agenda, I believe, correct? Right, Bob?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I would move to add the statutory finance report to tonight's agenda, even though it wasn't published.
Support.
Support. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? You had 100% vote.
Your turn.
The claim summary for October has been provided. The total claims for the month, less the STEPCA and APREA claims, are $23,140,720.49. Just one quick comment. The immediate payments included almost $14 million in payments to the state for the state education tax collected. Those payments were made on October 14th and October 28th, and the STEPCA and APREA claims are listed separately at the bottom.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve claims in amount of $23,140,720.49.
With the exception of the STEPCA.
Well, they're in addition to that. Do one then the other.
Is there support? Richardson? Discussion? Nothing to talk about. By roll call vote.
Commissioner Max Bauer.
Yes.
Inman.
Yes.
Hooper.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am.
Stepka.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Now, the STEPCA Claims.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the payment to Stepka Priya in amount of $6,339.45.
Support. Supported by Richardson. By roll call vote.
Commissioner Inman.
Yes.
Hooper.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am.
Stepka.
Abstain.
Richardson.
Yes.
Axbauer.
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Ready? Back to reports of standing committees. Item number 1 on the consent calendar.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that this item be pulled from the consent calendar and forwarded back to public safety. I believe it's an issue that public safety needs to address, that being the contract between the City of Traverse City and Grand Traverse County for central records, and they're also asking that we look at the same time having ensuing discussions in regard to possible police-sheriff collaboration.
Fire.
I support.
Been moved and supported. We remove this from the, send it to the committee.
Let me take a shot at this.
Oh, go ahead.
I think what the city is asking for is if a group of commissioners and a group of city commissioners can get together and have a preliminary discussion on a couple of fronts, including central records and police services, and then, if warranted, we would come back and send it to the committee level. I mean, that's basically what they've asked. But, you know,
I believe we have a standing committee in place that deals with these issues that should go back to public safety.
So who would meet with the city if public safety has it?
That'll be up to public safety.
Oh, I see, you'd have the membership from public safety would meet with them, is what you're thinking.
Dennis, do you have input on that?
No, I mean, it appears they are public safety issues. I suppose taking this, you should refer anything on the receive and file issue back to a committee, that is correct. And then that committee could take it up and recommend things to the board or, make recommendations on how it should be handled. I do agree.
Public safety has not seen this letter.
No.
No.
No one has, I think it just came.
All right. Okay.
Anybody else?
No.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Carried.
Okay. 22?
Item 22. Mrs. Friend.
Oh, I wanted to, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution. And then for discussion, just wanted to talk to you.
Is your support?
I'll support.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the issue of the Siegel implementation. As far as, for example, this resolution says, we're not moving forward with the current state of economy and so forth. But I think that there's been maybe not necessarily a buy-in to the Siegel study, a real vested interest on the part of the county on whether to implement it or not implement it. And I just want to address that underlying issue. I think Chris mentioned it at the meeting about shelving the study, and obviously I had mentioned, we need to come up with a decisive course of action for the benefit of the employees. So, first of all, am I under any miscommunication with the County Board of Commissioners that we haven't made a definitive decision on the implementation of this? And I'm not talking about, the raises, that's a component of it, but I'm talking about the implementation of the study.
Well, I guess if you can say something, 7 people can walk out with a different idea of what was said, but it's my belief that the Board of Commissioners, when we decided to go for it and when the study was completed, felt that we should move forward with the recommendation from the implementation study, with the exception of positions that we felt should be challenged, that would be reviewed through the Human Resources Department, and we decided not to go through the challenging process until we had a human resources director, so that was kind of placed on hold, is what I remember. So outside of the number of positions that we felt should be challenged, that the remaining part of the plan was met our acceptance, and that we held off for 09 and 08. We made a decision in 08 and 09 not to move forward with it. It was purely based on the concern of the budget issues and what kind of year in 09 we were going to have, and we would reconsider that for the following year. And then this year we're doing sort of the same thing, and that is, the economic situation of our budget is really holding back the movement of the recommendation, not necessarily the recommendations, other than the positions that are being challenged. That's kind of where I thought everything was at with the study.
So essentially, the study's still valid, we just can't quite implement it.
For financial reasons.
Yes.
But there are components of the study that are still that we still want reviewed. Is that correct, Dennis? Or am I off?
Oh, that'll be, really, I guess that's up to you. We started prior to your action, we started the evaluation of a number of the positions. And so we've been kind of going through that process. Primarily Arlene has been doing that. But, we've now suspended that because, because we're not implementing the study, which is, of course, the board's decision. So we're not going to do anything more with the study. I'm telling you from staff perspective, I see no reason to do anything more with the study unless the board decides they want to do something more with the study at a later date. It was pretty clear from the vote last week that there's no desire to implement it at this time. We'll still keep monitoring the market and those kinds of things, which is an important component.
You just mentioned Arlene was doing what? I couldn't hear you very well.
The board directed us, when we hired a new HR director, to take the positions that the board identified as needing to be reevaluated, and the board said those should be reevaluated by HR. When you had some discussions over the last couple of months about moving some of that forward, and I believe it was Commissioner Maxbauer talked specifically about the Commission on Aging employees, I reinitiated that part of the work with HR staff, and Arlene started to review the positions that the board identified, I believe in January, I may be wrong on that, and said, we want you to reevaluate these. We're not sure they fit where they belong. So we started that work, and now we've kind of, we're holding off on it because it's just, it's time consuming. And if we're not implementing, there's really no reason to do it at this point in time. So that's what our position has been on this at this time.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that that Commissioner Friend was exactly right. I did say that I do believe that the Siegel study should be shelved, and I have not changed my opinion.
I guess the only comment that I would make is this board in 2000, or the county board in 2008, voted to implement the study. We got right down into the very end of our budget process and chose not to eliminate it. This board, the seated board, has met with the county administrator and our labor attorney on multiple occasions over the last year and talked about the implementation of the study. No one at any of those times had opportunity to say that they didn't believe the study should be implemented. Although there wasn't a vote, there was a lot of head nodding going on, and we sent Dennis into negotiations to negotiate contracts based on that information, and then to choose not to implement the study. I understand the economics, but to choose not to implement the study really takes away his credibility as a negotiator on our behalf. It's interesting that just a few weeks ago we had discussion about it wasn't the implementation of the furlough days was an undue hardship on county employees, but yet we have documented information that states that at least a portion of our employees are not being properly compensated. But that's okay to just put the hardship on those people, but it wasn't fair to spread the hardship across the board to all county employees with the furlough days. I'm not sure that I quite believe that that's a consistent opinion, but the board has made the decision not to implement Siegel, and at this time, I think somewhere along the way, if commissioners truly want to have a discussion about simply throwing it out, we need to have that discussion, not just put it on a shelf. If we want to take a position that it is not a valid study, then we need to make that decision and make a ruling on our behalf to do that.
I don't believe it's a valid study for a number of reasons. I don't believe that enough of the private sector was taken into consideration. I have a problem with some of the information in the Siegel study, and I'll just give you an example. One of the things that I noted, and I honestly, I think it was a secretarial position, and there was nothing listed for the city of Traverse City. And so I went to Richard Lewis, and I said, Richard, how come we have nothing here from the city? Because I was told if there was no response from information requested, that it would just be like no information. Richard Lewis told me, we responded to that, Chris. They had the information, they just didn't put it in your report. I've got a number of problems with this study, and I really don't think it's a valid study. And when you take a look at some of the comparisons, and I will go back to the Commission on Aging employees, I'm sorry, they go into clients' homes and they scrub toilets and they vacuum and they do everything a janitor does. But suddenly, in the study, they show up way down at the bottom of the list. I don't think it's a valid study. And I think Commissioner Wheelock is exactly right. I do think we have to have that discussion.
Well, I disagree, and I believe it is a valid study, although there are pieces of it there are inconsistencies, which is where the board said it should be reevaluated, and that's what we were in the process of doing. Having said that, I highly doubt that Siegel or our staff purposefully left any information out that we were given by any of the market groups. And in fact, on the issue of the city of Traverse City, I personally looked at the responses we got from the city of Traverse City. And I think Mr. Lewis must not have understood your question, because there was clearly no answer to those questions. Having said that, I totally respect the Commission's decision based on the economics, and that's your right, and I totally respect it. But let me talk about, Commissioner Friend and I had a discussion the other day, and this is what we have to kind of figure out. I don't have an answer for you on this. There are two parts to the study. There is the mechanics of the study, which is the wage system, and then there's the decision on what you pay people, okay? We were having a real problem with our old wage system that was some 15 years old, in that as the longer you have the system, and I've told you this before, the less valid it is. Positions change, things change. And in fact, in the year before, and I'm giving you a rough estimate, we could give you an exact number. In the year before we hired Siegel to do the study, the county board, some of the old members will remember, put a moratorium on requests for reclassifications a year before. At that time, we talked, Sally and Arlene and I yesterday, I think we had around 24 or 25 requests for reclassifications of positions almost 5 years ago. And since then, we've had this moratorium in place. So my concern is, are there another 20, 30, 40 reclassification requests from employees that are on hold now because of this, because of our moratorium, assuming we were going to adopt Siegel? So this gets to the mechanics issue. And so what we have to decide as staff, and I would ask you to allow us to make a recommendation to you, and we haven't figured it out yet, we have to decide on the mechanics issue. For example, we did all new job descriptions. Okay, now, one or two of them may not be completely accurate, but they meet all the new legal requirements, they meet all the new standards, and we'd like to implement those job descriptions. And I think we probably can. The second part of it is the classification, where people fit in relationship to each other. I'm not talking about their salary, but where they fit in the relationship to each other value-wise. That's something we really need, because short of that, what we have to do, right now, we talked today, we're going to have to go back and use this now almost 18-year-old wage and salary system and try to make it work with any reclassification request we have, and we're skeptical on our ability to do that. So we would love to use the classification system at least, not talking about the salaries. But the problem with that is, when you look at classifying people, you look at pay, and when you look at pay, you're talking about a bargainable issue, and that requires bargaining with the collective bargaining agreement. And I can tell you for sure, any of the groups that were going to get raises in Siegel are not going to be willing to collectively bargain to have their classifications change unless the pay comes with it. So that's the dilemma that we kind of face. But the mechanic part of that study is still something that I think has validity, and it's something that we're trying to figure out what we could implement, if you agree, of course, and what can't be implemented because of bargaining and things like that. And so we're kind of working through that right now, and we hope to make a recommendation to you. So I think it's a very good idea for you to make a decision on whether the study has any validity or whether you want to shelve it. And of course, we'll do whatever you decide in that regard. We would only ask that you allow us to at least prepare for you what, if any, parts of it may have value in implementing, like job descriptions, in any event. And so, I hope you give us, 2 or 3 weeks to do that at least. But I do think it's a very good idea that, as the commissioner stated, that you make this decision, because, either we're going to relook at it or we're going to end it, and that's what we should decide. Yeah, it'll be a lot better for everybody. So, thank you.
Everybody happy?
No, I just wanted and I didn't pull this, obviously, we could have passed this resolution and not had this discussion, and I certainly, don't mean to pick a scab or anything, but I think that it's an important discussion to have, because I do think that the pay raise increases sometimes get muddied into the water of some of the structural issues. And, you can choose to find validity in the study and say, look, to implement it, we're implementing the structure, the mechanics, as you call it, but we only have a finite number of dollars to implement the financial portion of it. And so what's the best way to do that? So right now we're at a point where we're saying we're not going to implement any portion of the finance part of it, but there's still that other portion. As far as the $190,000 study, it's been spent, it's been done. Scrapping a study that may have merit is not any more a good use of our resources than maybe paying for an overpriced study. I mean, it's not a good idea. If it has merit, we should use this body of knowledge. Now, if it doesn't and there are things off base, then maybe we need to adjust those, or if it's so significantly flawed, then we perhaps need to toss it. But how do you get at that answer is what I've kind of been struggling with since last week's long meeting. And the only thing I can come up with is if, and I don't know if you let staff make recommendations on the structure first and then see where we're at, or possibly, look at doing a committee that is, look, 9 of us don't want to go through this study as a committee of the whole. I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of different opinions and some right in the middle. Maybe if we do an ad hoc committee of like 3 commissioners, and let's get four people of the county residents at large that have human resource expertise, and maybe evaluate the merit of the study. And make a recommendation to this committee. Obviously, we now have at least, nearly a year's worth of time to do this. My biggest concern is we wouldn't right now have an HR director to kind of oversee the process or guide the process.
Well, I think Dennis had a good idea. He's familiar with the study. He wants to work with it. He knows some of the flaws involved in it. He's going to get an HR director here in the next few months, it sounds like, potentially. And then he'll have an idea of what to move forward with on this study. We have a year, like you said, a year to work with it. A year to figure out where the flaws are, a year to figure out what he can do with it and what he can. And I think staff is the best place to work with that, frankly.
Well, right now, we have a motion on the floor to not implement Siegel due to economic times. And I would really like to ask, does anyone think economic times are going to be any better next year? We're taking $1 million. And I'm not talking about the structure of the study right now. We're talking, about the salary and wage increases that are recommended. And we're going to be back here next year looking at whether or not we should implement Siegel. And for that reason, I think Commissioner Friend's suggestion has a great deal of merit. I think we need to make a determination whether or not we're going to move forward, whether or not this is a valid study. And again, I don't believe it is. I simply disagree that it is. And I understand that some commissioners do feel it is. But I think Commissioner Friend's recommendation of getting some volunteers in the community involved in taking a look at HR people, and we have them retired in Traverse City, and maybe some will volunteer. I think it's an excellent idea.
Well, I guess my suggestion is, let's move forward with the resolution as it stands, and then, if the, I'm just make a recommendation that we just send the issue of the, I don't want to use the word validity, but the components of the study back to LNA for discussion, for a recommendation to the board.
I just want to add that it seems to make some sense that an independent ad hoc committee maybe take a look at it, since we do have the time, and evaluate it. Maybe somehow it can be adjusted to fit the economic times, perhaps, which, frankly, may not improve for a while. But there certainly have been enough questions raised about it that I think an independent outside group, such as Commissioner Friend suggested, would make a lot of sense. And can I ask Dennis a quick question, too? What exactly was Arlene asked to do, and was that by the prior board?
No.
Prior to this board?
Yes.
Okay.
It would have been last year. We asked the non-union the departments that had non-union employees to evaluate the results of the study for their employees and then bring to the county board their justification about why certain positions should be reevaluated, why they thought that the recommendation was not correct.
Okay.
And then the board made a decision on non-union positions and said, we're going to ask HR staff to go back and check the work of Siegel by contacting the market, by looking at the job descriptions, by looking at the classification, to see if they agree that with the staff, with the departments, or with Siegel. And so that was put off because we had time to wait to do that. And that was not done for the union positions because that's a bargaining issue and requires bargaining. We never got to that step of bargaining with the union. So we have these, I want to say, Sally, do you remember, I think it's maybe 13 positions, 13 jobs. That doesn't mean 13 positions. There could be in Commission on Aging, home chore workers, there could be 15 employees. We consider that one. So there were about 13 non-union ones that the board said, you have staff go back and reevaluate that. So when I thought that this was going to move forward and we didn't have an HR director, the staff started working on those reevaluations. I never saw the results of what Arlene came up with because we didn't get that far along.
Well, finally, one of the reasons I think it would be helpful to send it back to LNA for this discussion is that, that we could throw out a number of scenarios and then give Dennis the rest of the month to check on it, report, and we can just give a report back to the board. That is a possibility of, maybe a good suggestion of having several personnel managers in the community take an objective look at it for us. But the other piece of that question is, are they willing to put the time and effort into it? Their plates are probably filled at their own employment situations, and would they be willing to devote some time and energy and maybe an extended process to to help us lead us through. I mean, you know, those are things that maybe Dennis could make some calls on to see if people are willing to put that kind of time into it, but.
Well, I got the impression we're not talking about current HR directors.
No, we're talking
They're
about...
talking about
Retired ones?
retired ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you can find them.
I mean, I think.
How do you know
it's
unless you
just-
ask?
It's
That's
just-
right.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't know unless we asked.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could do that through LNA. We could put out something that asks for that. I think that collectively, we have to come to a decision.
Yeah, I'm not
And
disagreeing with that.
collectively, I think we can come to a better decision by having something recommended to us with some people with some
Levels
real
of
distinct HR experience rather than, yeah.
Okay, we have a
Yeah.
motion. Go through.
I believe that this, obviously, we have a lot of a discussion that has to happen with this process. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that I agree LNA is the place to do that. I believe this has huge financial implications to this county. I believe recommendations should come back to Ways and Means.
All right, that's fine. Well, can we address the motion, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, then come
please.
back and then decide where to send this to?
Who made the motion?
I
It was so
did
long
to,
ago,
for the
I forgot.
resolution, just call a question.
You want to amend the motion?
No, I
vote
think
on
we'll
the-
do it.
vote on the
to-
motion,
Vote
let's
on
do
the
the other.
motion.
Let's do two.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we direct staff to try to evaluate the formation of a, I don't care if you call it an ad hoc committee or whatever, made up of some county commissioners and some members of the public to review the Siegel study and try to make a final determination on its validity one way or the other, and bring that back to Ways and Means next month.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Sorry. It gives me a.
Gives you the evil.
Was there a
No,
second?
I really hope that we have county commissioners volunteer to be appointed to this committee that are on, you know, either end of the spectrum and in between, because I think that would lead some credibility to the process.
What spectrum?
Well,
Yeah, really.
There's a lot of spectrums. Could I make a comment? I really would just ask you to consider changing that from asking staff to evaluate that to commissioners evaluating that, because quite frankly, you know, I think it would be better to come from commissioners because they're the ones making the suggestion on how this should be set up rather than from me.
why don't we, couldn't LNA take a look at exactly what the committee would be
That's where it
assigned to do?
Yes.
And how we would go about placing people on it and forward that to Ways and Means? Would that be fine, Sonny?
That's fine.
Do you want to amend the motion?
That makes sense.
Maybe we should give him an extra month.
Yes, he said yes.
What I said.
And I'll amend my second.
Wasn't that 20
Didn't I say
minutes
Does
ago?
everybody understand the motion now?
Linda, could you read it again?
I don't think so. She's going to review the tape.
It'd be goofy.
I believe the motion would be to have the LNA committee review the possible creation of an ad hoc committee made up of county commissioners and general public persons to review the validity and of the Siegel study and make recommendation back to Ways and Means.
Thank you.
That help?
You're happy with that?
I'm happy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
All right.
The next item is number
23.
23.
That would be me. I am not in favor of this budget. And Dean, if I read the Record Eagle correctly, it said, and I quoted this, so I'm going to do this. It says Grand Traverse County budgeted a $362,000 increase in property tax revenue for 2010. Now we know we're going to have a loss of approximately $65,000 instead of that revenue. And what does that, or if that's true, how does that impact the already approximately $950,000 we're supposed to be taking out of fund balance?
The Record Eagle article was true in stating the amount of tax revenue that we budgeted. They were not correct in stating the amount that we could lose based on a CPI or an inflation adjustment of a negative 0.3. as we explained at Ways and Means, we simply do not know at this time what additions to taxable value we may have. As Dennis pointed out last week, we will have losses as well. All of those numbers, that information will not be available until the tax rolls are turned into equalization. We simply won't know what the tax revenue will be. If those numbers that were stated, which I certainly don't anticipate that we're going to lose 65,000, because I do believe we will have some increase in our taxable value, but I can't project or estimate what that would be.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. Still, honestly, Michigan's exodus rate's the highest in the nation. The unemployment rate is the highest in the nation. A family leaves the state of Michigan every 12 minutes. We are now dipping $950,000 into fund balance, approximately, for next year's budget. I don't think we can sustain this, and I truly think that this action is irresponsible. I think we have to be more conservative.
Dennis, could you run by one more time? We've gone through a year of 14 years or so of budgeting fund balance, and how much did we actually spend on?
Well, I don't have those numbers before me, but I can tell you, I think we demonstrated to you during budget about 8 years, where we had budgeted fund balance in each of the 8 years up to in excess of $3 million a year. And of those 8 years, we only spent 1 year did we spend any fund balance, and that was about 4 years ago, we spent $125,000 of fund balance.
Of $3 million that we budgeted.
Well, of whatever we budgeted that year. So what I'm saying is, over that time, I think I had added up, we'd budgeted something on the order of $12 or $15 million, and we spent $125,000 of it. And during that same period of time, we went from a $5 million fund balance to a $9.5 million fund balance. I do want to point out, too, that remember that $950,000 number is a number that's in this budget, but remember that your action not to implement the Siegel study saves 1.5% estimated, which is roughly going to be around $340,000 to $350,000, which I would assume, if no other action is taken place, that will reduce the use of that fund balance by that $350,000. So really, I think we're looking at more around the $600,000 level.
We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to adopt the 2010 budget and the General Appropriation Act as outlined.
Support.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Need a better roll call on this one.
I'll call for one if I hear dissenting vote.
All right.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I told you.
Roll call, 6-2.
By Dickey's rules, that's procedure.
Okay.
Commissioner Hooper.
Yes.
Friend?
No.
Wheelock?
Yes.
Stepka?
No.
Richardson?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
No.
Inman?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Yes. Item 24.
That was me. I just have a quick question for Dennis.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Dennis, in this resolution, it says that, we're using an insurance agent, and I'm just asking this question because we never did this when I worked for Shell, and of course that's different, that's a private sector thing, but we did have an HR person, and that HR person went out and, and we had between 300 and 500 employees here. So we had, a good sizable number. That employee went out and priced insurance policies and brought it to the company, and then we adopted insurance accordingly. Why are we using an agent?
Well, the board's used an agent for years, and the reason we use an agent is because of the size of the HR staff. We have 5 people in the HR staff. We do payroll in the HR. We do the whole gamut of HR work. And it's been determined over the years that it's less expensive to do it that way than having staff dedicated to that. But as I told you during budget, and as I mentioned again, I think last week, our intention would be next year to bid the agent issue out. So I guess the short answer to that would be, that'll be a time where you can review if it's more cost-effective to do it internally as opposed to bidding it out. That would be my suggestion. Because I think after this, I'm pretty sure after this, we've got everything kind of bid out for, where we got at least a year or 2 years more on the bids. So, next year would be a really good time to look at whether it's more cost-effective to use an agent or to bid it to do it in-house.
Crossfire.
That's what this is?
I know. There is a level of expertise that I think is specialized when we go out and ask these folks to visit with Blue Cross and Priority and all these dental programs. They live and breathe this stuff every day, 5 days a week for the whole year. They know the industry. They know who to call. They know what's happening in terms of pricing and why, and what kind of, they have the specialty of trying to model stuff for us, and they devote a tremendous amount of time. And, for example, the previous employer that I came from, they had someone that they contracted out that did that specialty. So I think we have to keep, on the other side of the fence, I think we have to keep in mind that this area is fast changing, with all the different things going on in healthcare today, the things that are going on in Washington, and I think we'd be well served to have somebody that is on top of the legislative part, the economic part, the relationship part, and the changing part on a day-to-day basis that we can rely on to help us guide us through. And so that's just my personal feeling that we should. I've been very supportive of the process.
I'm inclined to think that Larry's right. There's an expertise and a comfort level that comes with an agent. Last Friday afternoon, as most of you know, I had an opportunity to use my insurance agent. While I still had 5 fire departments in my facility, I contacted my insurance agent before the last of the fire trucks left. I'd talked to the cause and origin gentleman that does the investigation, the agent, the adjuster that's going to be there. I received 5 phone calls from my insurance company before the fire trucks left the facility. There is a reason to have an agent. I'm fairly confident I could have never contacted those people and made anything happen that fast.
Do we have a motion on that?
No, we don't.
No, we
I'll
don't.
move forward to adopt the resolution as presented.
Support?
Been moved and supported. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same? That was easy. Next one is number 32, Road Commission.
And I just want to point out, remember, we put some extra information on your desk from Bob with some answers to some questions.
Sonny pulled that one, didn't you?
Yes, I pulled that item. Do you want a motion before we have a discussion?
Well, we can't move forward with it, can we? Because we haven't done a public hearing.
Technically, we should have a motion in a second before we have discussion. That's
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
point, but I'm not making that motion, so.
I'll make the motion.
To increase the number from 3 to 5?
To increase the number from 3 to 5 and remove free health benefits from members of the County Road Commission.
And schedule it for public hearing.
Effective January 1st, 2010.
And schedule it for public hearing.
And schedule it for public hearing if that's what it requires.
Support.
And now I have a question. Is this proper to have a motion here before we schedule a public hearing, or should we go to public hearing
Actually, there
first?
should be a public hearing, and you can have the vote at the same time as the public hearing if you'd like. You're supposed to give 28 days' notice, and
So what I
you
should be
also-
doing is making a motion to schedule a public hearing.
For the board meeting next month.
For the
That would
board
be the
meeting next
earliest
month.
that you could do it, yeah.
I have a question for Mr. Cooney. Mr. Cooney, I understand that we have to have a hearing to increase the number of road commissioners from 3 to 5. We do not require a hearing to eliminate the health, dental, and vision. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're correct. It's only the question whether to add commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
We're doing a check here because you've changed your November board meeting because of the Thanksgiving holiday. And so Dean is adding it up to make sure we have 28 days. We may not. It may have to go to Ways and Means or Board in December.
Okay.
He's the guy who counts. In case I didn't tell you.
You've got to have clarification for the person that made the motion. Bob, it's my understanding that the board does not dictate, they don't pick the benefits they can or can't have. The only authority we have is to say that they can participate in the employment plan of the road commission, or they cannot, or they can't, and if they, at their expense, but also the board could also say they could go into the benefit plan at their cost.
Well,
so you have to make that distinction in terms of direction. Is that correct?
Yes, there are actually two ways that the county could actually pay for the benefits for the road commissioners, but that isn't the way it's done. We've adopted a resolution under a different statute that requires the money to come out of road commission funds.
That, thank you.
And under that system, I'm sorry, I lost.
Well, my point is, in terms of the motion,
yes.
My assumption is that the motion maker would consider not listing the benefits, but saying whether they can, road commissioners can
Yes.
be in the plan of the road commission benefit structure, or they can't. And if they can't, or excuse me, they to have the road commission pay for the plan. And the other question is, we can allow them to be in the plan, but it could be at their cost.
That's correct.
So there's two different issues there.
Could we decide to allow
We have to separate the two.
road commissioners to participate in a health insurance and/or pension plan that their employees participate in. That's the language of the statute, actually.
I guess my suggestion, for what it's worth, is I'd like to separate these two issues.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to have a motion.
No,
I think
Commissioner
Beth
Friend was the
seconded.
seconder.
But I think we need a motion to schedule a public hearing to create a 5-member road commission. That's one issue.
Yes.
And then the issue of the benefit package
Is
is a
another.
separate issue. Would you agree with that, Bob?
I'd be willing to withdraw my motion if Commissioner Friend would agree.
Want to make another one?
Well, she's got to agree first.
I don't know, maybe I won't agree, but.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, you can withdraw your motion. She doesn't.
No, he can't without the support.
No, we have to vote on it
Well,
then.
anyway, my point is, I can understand why you say that, except for the fact that, a person may not want to add 2 road commissioners unless they know that the healthcare benefits are.
This is where we get that, level of trust, I guess, between the commissioners.
So we have a motion on the floor, right?
I would say that the motion is improper at this time because we haven't had the public hearing.
Right.
Because if a vote were...
Well, we can vote it down.
Somebody make a
You just
motion.
wanna-
I would like to make a motion to schedule.
Wait, we have a motion already on the floor.
We have a
No, it's
motion.
been
No,
withdrawn.
we don't.
Oh, did Beth, okay.
Oh,
Why
all
did
right.
you were saying,
Well,
sorry.
she finally did. Okay, I would like to make a motion to schedule a public hearing on
You don't have.
December 15th
There you go.
at the Ways and Means meeting to discuss increasing the road commission from 3 members to 5.
I support that, and that's better anyway, because you might have not many people attend due to it right before Thanksgiving, so.
Oh, I see.
December
Like I said, before
15th.
Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
You'll have the usual 2 people.
Yeah. I don't think a lot last time we did it.
I'm not in favor of
Well,
holding
we're
a
still
public
in.
hearing yet. We have 1 county
I'm not
commissioner
either.
absent. And the best you're going to get out of me tonight is, if you guys want to talk about this at the next Ways and Means meeting, that's fine with me, and we'll all be present.
I will never vote to go to 5 until the state changes the law so that we can elect by district. And I'm all in favor otherwise, but until the state changes the law, I'll never vote for going to 5, because you could have 5 commissioners living on the same road if we just chose to elect them.
But do you think LNA would do that? You can appoint by area.
I'm not in favor of appointing 5. I'm in favor of electing them, but after the law has changed, that we can elect by district, and population, just like we do for us. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I want to touch back on the benefits a little bit, because I really do think it's going to have
Motion
a...
on the floor is not for
All right.
benefits.
Thank you.
So you're not even willing to schedule a public hearing
I'd rather have,
6 weeks from now?
no, I'd rather not schedule a public hearing. I'd rather have a discussion with the board, Ways and Means.
About the,
But you
Go back 3 to
can't
5.
make any decision without the public hearing
public
anyway.
hearing.
So
Well, that's true.
wouldn't you want to get the public's input?
They can come in and do public, it's going to be an agenda item.
Well,
I
I
don't
believe
know-
we
I don't know
actually,
what-
in fact, held 2 public hearings a year
did.
ago.
Yeah.
we did.
But we need to do it again.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll call the question.
yeah, let's just call a question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call.
Commissioner Friend,
Yes.
Wheelock,
No.
Stepka,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Maxbauer,
Yes.
Inman,
Nope.
Hooper,
No.
Chairman Thomas.
No.
4.
Motion failed.
All right, let's move on.
Now, you want to do the other part?
Yeah. I will make a motion to discontinue the benefits for the road commissioners, Grand Traverse County Road Commissioners.
I'll support if you'll make that effective December 31st of
Yes, effective December
2009.
31st, to allow them to,
And-
and allow them to purchase at their own cost their health benefits,
Okay, support.
dental, vision,
Is it just health benefits, dental and
N-
vision?
their benefits.
Well,
The benefits.
Benefits also
Health,
includes
dental,
retirements, life insurance.
Their benefits, yes.
So you're saying eliminate them all?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
But they can buy it at their own
They can
cost.
buy it at their own cost.
Okay.
That means that, what I believe she's saying is, the road commission would not spend money on their benefits, but they can buy into it with their salary.
Yes.
Or their money.
Yes.
That's what
That's
she's
what
saying.
I'm saying.
That's what she's saying.
But they can't really buy into their retirement. I mean, I think it warrants
All right.
letting them
You can't buy
keep
into
the
the
retirement to
retirement.
put
You
that
can
away.
I'll go
tax
health,
deferred.
dental, and vision, how's that?
And life.
And life, all right.
Support.
All right.
We're there.
All right. Well, you know, I think we're missing another piece of the equation, and I just soon have this discussion about salary when we talk about 3 to 5, but personally, but on the study that was given to us by someone from the Michigan Road Association thing, Beth, as Commissioner Maxbauer pointed out to me in the meeting, that road commissions that did not have benefits had a higher salary. And I have not had an opportunity to go back and review that chart to determine, you know, if we do reduce the benefit structure, whether their salary should be compensated somewhat for the reduction of that based on a peer review. And I just soon not get into that tonight. So, you know, you guys want to have a discussion about that, you know, in another Ways and Means, I'm fine with that, but I'm going to vote no on it right now.
I did a little bit of analysis in 2008, and I don't know if the camera can get this, and I don't know if the other commissioners can see this. In 2008, and what I did is started at the beginning of every meeting to the end of every meeting. And road commissioners, as a road commission, spent 12 hours and 18 minutes in meetings in 2008, according to their website. At $6,000 a year, that's $487.80 an hour. That is just on their $6,000 average salary. With their benefits are worth another $948.29 an hour, based on 2008, for a total compensation of $1,436.09 an hour.
Mr. Chairman? You still have the floor? I'm sorry.
I do.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You know, I think this is unreasonable. And this is public service. I just think it's unreasonable, and I think that the benefits simply have to be removed.
I think at this time it would be unfair to judge the amount of time and commitment that the road commissioners put into their job, just like it would be, without getting their input on other meetings they attend and other things that they have to be involved in the community and other meetings they attend and calls they get at home, just like it would be unfair to evaluate one opinion about whether a county commissioner is being fairly compensated, until you sit down and talk with a county commissioner and talk to them about the times, all the meetings they attend, their time commitment, the stuff that they do at home, the packets and all this other stuff. I think it's unfair to judge. They only have like a limited thing based on what was, if you count the number of meetings that they have, board meetings on the website. I don't think we would do fair justice in evaluating what they do without sitting down and talking with them.
To a degree, I agree with Commissioner Inman. I don't think, however, this is a job. This is a position. It's very different from a job. A job is something you show up for 40 hours a week and, put in a certain amount of time and create a certain amount of tasks. This is a position. It's very fluid. I'm sure, obviously, I think Commissioner Maxbauer has presented a bit of an extreme case, although I think it's maybe not that far off a reflection of what they do. I'm sure there's a few more meetings I have to go to than maybe what appears there, but nonetheless, it's not a job. And I think if we view it as a job, if we view it as a job, they're really overpaid, first of all. So that would be enough reason right there to say, get rid of it. So, anyway.
I guess, from my perspective, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable talking about reduction of benefits without having some discussion about the salary and the compensation, because whether you consider it or not, as far as I'm concerned, salary and benefits together create the compensation for positions. So I think you can't have discussion of one without the other. What the other piece of this little thing is, we have road commissioners, I believe, who are no longer seated that get benefits.
That's coming later.
And I don't know how you eliminate health care benefits per se for the 3 seated commissioners and not address the previous commissioners. I think all of that has to enter into the discussion. It's interesting. I did the road commission meeting as your representative to them on Wednesday morning after last week's Ways and Means meeting. A road commissioner who was in the audience present at this meeting was absolutely convinced and told the road commission that the reduction of the benefits did not apply to the seated road commissioners. Because I do remember that discussion being had, and Mr. Cooney said, yes, we had the ability to do that if we chose. And that's what he went out of this meeting feeling, that, we were going to eliminate the benefits, but it wasn't going to apply to him and the seated commissioners. So, I just believe that there's a lot more discussion that has to happen in regard to the compensation of not only the seated road commissioners, future road commissioners, but also the previously seated road commissioners. I don't think making the decision that effective, at least I didn't hear anything in that motion that affects those who were previously seated.
It's number 2 under new business.
That's retirement benefits.
And you can grandfather that in.
Anything else?
What's the motion?
To eliminate health, dental,
I knew
vision,
you'd
and
forget.
life.
All right. And then they could buy it at their own cost? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Effective December 31st.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Wheelock?
No.
Stepka?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Maxbauer?
Yes.
Inman?
Nope.
Hooper?
No.
Brent?
Yes.
Chairman Thomas?
Nope. I vote. All right. That gets us through the consent calendar quickly.
10 o'clock.
Now,
It's moving right along.
moving on to old business, I just wonder if this should be old business. We haven't talked about it here before. It didn't occur to me till I was sitting here.
Yeah, we put it under old business because you had some discussion of it last week, and you said move it to this week, so we considered it
That
old
was at Ways
business.
and Means, it wasn't here.
You are correct. Would you like to call it new business?
I'd love to call it new business.
We could move it there. Make it number 3 under new business?
Okay. All right. Any other old business other than new? New business,
That would be me
public
again.
comment discussion.
Yes, okay. The reason I brought this up was because at our Ways and Means Committee meeting, we had a group of members from the public, and they waited for an hour and 45 minutes for public comment to be on the agenda. And I was looking in my board book where I keep board rules, and under board rules, January 2nd, 2009, that I have printed out, it says, number 1 is call to order, number 2 is invocation, number 3 is pledge of allegiance, number 4 is limited public comment, then approval of the agenda, then special order of business. And I'm just saying that as a matter of courtesy, and we had people here tonight, and had they wanted to speak during public comment, they would have had to wait for over an hour. Out of courtesy to our constituents, wouldn't it be better to put public comment first, as it says under this Rule 2 in our board meetings, then approve the agenda, and then have special order of business?
So you're just basically asking we follow the board rules?
That's basically all I'm asking. I mean, the public comment is 3 minutes a person approximately. It's being courteous
I
to
would
our
rather-
constituents.
I'd rather see it with the public comment right after the approval of the agenda, because that might change somebody's, what they want to talk about.
And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, as long as Jim was here about MSU extension, is, if I have absolutely no problem with hearing somebody from public comment amending the agenda or adding a resolution to the administrator's report, but public comment really should be for public comment. If there are 10 people in the audience waiting to speak, and we get into a dialogue and talk about resolution, they're sitting there for another 10 or 15 minutes, and that's just not courteous. So that's my 2 cents on public comment.
I don't have any problem with changing.
Yeah, let's,
Sure.
The only thing is that, we don't have much public comment.
I think it's,
We should appreciate the person.
Yeah.
I agree with Chris on this. I think we should move public comment right like it's supposed to be
Okay.
in the board rules, and then let's get that above special orders of business, so people.
That
aren't
isn't
waiting
going to
around.
take any action.
Yeah, I mean, let's have staff do that.
Staff, yeah.
It's a good catch.
That's not going to take any action. Let's just do it.
Okay.
Move on to road commissioner
All right.
retirement benefits discussion.
Well, the reason I asked this to be under new business is I left Dennis a voicemail, and or I think I may have spoken with Katie, and I probably wasn't clear. What I was hoping for, Dennis, was some information on what we are paying our retired road commissioners and benefits, so that we might decide in the next month or the month after, as a new board, to have that discussion, whether we think those benefits are appropriate, whether we want to continue them, increase co-pays, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't get that message, Commissioner.
Well,
Katie was off the last couple
I
days,
wasn't
but-
clear.
Okay, but I will, we can glad.
And this is
we
my
can-
fault.
We can gladly do that. I think we actually did that for you last year when we had those
been
public
done, I
hearings,
know.
but we'll update those for you. And you want all the retirees that may get benefits, so you can kind of see the whole picture.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I'd like to see what it's costing.
Yep, we can
So that-
definitely do that.
That's getting back.
And
to
I'm
the-
sure costs have changed, insurance generally doesn't go down.
People fade
To
away.
Ways and Means, or where do you want it?
I'm not fussy, Ways and Means are fine.
I'll have it for you next month.
So that was the, if I can, ask Commissioner Maxwell a question? Thank you. So that was the, clarify for me again, you're looking for?
I'm just asking for information
Yeah.
on the cost of road commissioner,
commissioner?
retired road commissioners.
Retired.
Retired road
Okay.
commissioners.
I'm following you.
What
Okay,
what
yeah.
they're receiving in benefits.
Yeah, let's do that.
You know, I don't know if
I
their
would like to-
benefits have gone up from last year.
As part of
Yeah.
that same information, we should know exactly
Yeah.
what it
Yeah, we should
costs
know
for
what
the
it
current-
costs.
For the current road commission.
We will-
And
You know,
and now, is
have
that something
that
the road commission pays, or does the county pay it?
No, the road.
No, the road commission pays, and that's where you
Yeah.
have to kind of be careful. That's what Commissioner Inman was talking about.
Exactly.
If you dictate what their benefits are, according to the opinion that we had under that one law, you may be required to pay for it. That's why, when this was originally adopted back years ago,
We only
the
did
county
salary.
board said, you can have whatever benefits your
You wanna pay
employees
for it.
get, which means it's a road commission responsibility. If you say, and that's not for salary, I believe, I'm going from memory here,
Just
but if you
salary,
say,
yeah.
you will have this insurance, under that one law, I believe, Bob, it said we have a responsibility to pay for it. And so that was where we've always tried to, that's why it was designed kind of the way it was. But I don't think it impacts you saying you have no benefits, because there's no cost to that.
That's right. But I'm not saying that, I'm just
I
saying,
understand.
could we have the
Yeah,
information?
I will gladly provide that.
That's good information, yeah.
That's
Okay,
it.
happy? Item
Yeah.
number 3, elected officials' salaries.
Yeah,
Really get into
you know, I just want to say to the board that my apology if I misunderstood the board's kind of position. Historically, in the county, what we have done is when we have tried to give the same raise to everybody. So if we gave raises to union people, we tried to give the same raises to non-union people, and that's been a general policy. So based on the direction that you gave me last week on negotiating, and the fact that I've been able to negotiate 2 tentative agreements at 1.5%, I based this recommendation on 1.5%, assuming we would want to give the same. But that was just an assumption on my part. It was only something I offered to do this to get you talking. Typically, I don't even make a recommendation on elected official salary because I believe it's totally in your purview. So that's the recommendation I put together. The part about the retirement, I do want you to, I would ask you to evaluate the fairness of having retirement paid by only about 50 of our employees. Non-union management.
Co-care health insurance, you mean?
I'm sorry.
Not retirement.
Health insurance. I apologize.
10
I'm not
o'clock.
quite used to these, to
Late
the
hours.
meetings after 10 o'clock. I'm trying to adjust. And so,
Could have coffee.
and my rationale for this is, remember, the employees who pay a copay on health got an extra raise when they decided to take a copay on, when you decided they would pay a copay on health. And I think we figured today was about 1.5% at the time. And they got that raise to offset the cost of the health, okay? And that was offered to all the unions and everybody, and the only one, no one took it up, but it was given imposed on the non-union people. So why I recommended this, to remove that, is simply because I believe all employees should pay a copay on health. I really do believe that's the appropriate thing. But until we're able to accomplish that, we have now made a decision that 50 or so employees are going to pay a copay on health and no one else will, and I just think that's an inequity. So I did that to point out the inequity in my mind, and I think it would be fair to those employees not to pay that until such time that we have a position where everyone's going to pay that. Again, remember that my hope was that when we established appropriate salaries, then everybody was going to pay the copay. I've always supported that. I think employees should pay part of health, because I'm going to tell you, when I go and negotiate with employees about health insurance, they're not real interested in talking about health insurance because they don't have any skin in the game.
That's
When
true.
employees are paying part of the health insurance and the cost goes up, they're much, in my experience, they're much more receptive to look at alternative insurances, lower benefits, higher co-pays, because they're paying it. And so I really do believe that's somewhere we need to get. But anyway, I put this recommendation based on what I thought was kind of the general direction of trying to keep everybody the same. So if I erred in that, I apologize to the board. But that's what this is. This includes a 1.5% increase and a request to consider removing the health copay for the elected officials, because we're only talking about elected officials tonight.
That's what I was kind of confused. If you were talking about a larger number of employees, the 50
No,
employees, or were you
but I
talking
can,
about
but I can
elected
tell you, my
officials?
intention would be, if you approved it, I would make the same recommendation for those other employees that are paying it, because I think, it should be equitable. But, and obviously, if you don't, then I won't make that recommendation for the other employees as well. I'm going to try to mirror whatever you do with these employees, with the elected officials. I'll try to mirror that with the non-union employees in recommendation.
With respect to the elected officials, I would not be in favor of changing anything right now. The way that I look at it is, each and every one of us, including us, put our name on the ballot, knowing exactly what our compensation was for the next term. So I'm not interested in changing that when we haven't made any definitive, real direction with Siegel other than not implementing the financial portion for next year. But one thing that I would really like to consider, have the commission consider, because this is really a touchy issue, negotiating your own salary, negotiating salaries of fellow elected officials. And I would really like us to consider the Compensation Commission statute that the state has on the books, where you are able to, implement a compensation commission to review the information, empower them with the information, and take a recommendation from them.
Well, I did get the information from Commissioner Friend, and I reviewed it, and I guess I come back with just a different viewpoint, in no respect to Commissioner Friend, disrespect. I think one of our, first of all, I'm not aware of any county in the state of Michigan that defers that responsibility to a compensation committee. But I guess I take my position, one of the main responsibilities of a county commissioner by statute is to set salaries and budgets and set policy. And I do not personally want to defer one of my main responsibilities to a non-elected group. And believe me, I have real problems and challenges with the powers of the Board of Public Works to implement an assessment fee without having that vote come first to the elected body or the Board of Commissioners. But that's just another example of my disagreement in the statute there. But the other problem I have with the Compensation Committee is that it gives them, really, for the most part, not quite ultimate authority, but it gives them pretty strong authority. It requires, by statute, it requires that if you disagree in either small part or large part with a recommendation coming back from the Compensation Committee, it requires a 2/3 vote to not take the recommendation from a Compensation Committee. So for those reasons, I'm not in favor of having a Compensation Committee. So
I would have to agree with Larry. Compensation committees historically are there to insulate the politicians from making the
Hard decision.
nasty, hard decisions about compensation. And I don't relish making these decisions, but
right.
It's what we were elected to do, so there we are.
One other thing I just wanted to mention that I neglected to, and just from a historical perspective, I do want to mention that you remember some discussion took place about dealing with this issue of car allowances for elected officials. And I understand now that you can't reduce car allowances down, but I just thought it was important to mention that all of your elected officials now either have a car or a car allowance, with the exception of the Register of Deeds, who has been omitted from that. The other one that doesn't have it is the prosecutor, but that's because the prosecutor chose not to accept it. It was given to him by the board, but he did not accept it. So Peg Haynes talked to me about that again yesterday and reiterated the fact that she believes it's not fair that the other ones have it, and I think she sent you all letters. So I just wanted to bring that up again for your consideration.
I would like to support Commissioner Friend's idea of a compensation committee when it comes to our salaries. I really think that our salaries, our benefits need to be reviewed, and they need to be reviewed independently. So, for what it's worth, I agree with Commissioner Friend.
So we're going to, can we get back to the
Somebody
issue
gonna
of
get-
elected officials?
You know, I don't think that,
Yeah.
though you mentioned that it sets salary, that we set salaries, budget, and policies, I don't think that you're deferring that. I mean, you're still doing that for the lion's share of the employees or the people who are compensated through the county. And I don't really think that it stops you from, making nasty, hard decisions. I think that it gives a voice to the public on compensation for elected officials, and I don't think that's such a bad thing.
We can set up a compensation committee anytime in December, January, February, March. Right now, though, we have elected officials' salaries that we're supposed to be talking about. I'm not
I
stopping you
understand.
from that.
I know.
But that's not the issue on the table.
Stick to the agenda.
Well, I guess I'd like to make a remark, and that is, I believe in fairness, and I believe in parity, and I guess I'll have to fault myself here. I guess I was not I was not aware that all elected officials, county elected officials, had a car allowance and the
Or a
registered,
car.
de- or a
Or a
car,
car.
and the registered deeds did not. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I think we need to discuss that, but we're kind of stuck in between the elected cycle, so we can't lower it. If we remove the vehicle, then we got to add that amount we're giving them to their salary to make them whole. So my feeling is, if we're going to be fair across the board, we should give Peggy the car allowance for 2010 as the same amount as we give Linda Colburn and everyone else, and then in the 2010 deliberations for the next election cycle, then we can decide what we want to do with all elected official salaries and vehicals.
Not
12.
to 2012.
I'm sorry, 2012.
Is that a motion, Larry?
Yes, I could.
As it regards to this recorder of deeds?
Yeah, I mean, I could make that specific motion to the register of deeds.
Okay, I'll
But the
second
problem
it.
is, we haven't talked about whether they get 1.5 yet.
We're just talking about car allowance right now, aren't we?
It ought to be two separate issues.
Right, right, I mean, because we could still, they'll come back to the 1.5. Okay, I would make a motion that the register of deeds gets the same car allowance as does the other elected officials, i.e. the county clerk.
Second.
$400. $5,400.
Is that 5,400, Dennis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Are you serious? I can't imagine. I think that you are taking
So
one
you can
step
take it
back in
anytime.
order to take 2 steps forward later.
They approved
I have a really tough time with that, to say the least.
Yeah.
And this is no disrespect to Peggy. As a matter of fact, I think she's probably gotten the raw end of the deal totally. I don't know who on this commission didn't like her in the past or her position in the past. She's definitely, but you know what? She did put her name back on the ballot, and that was the compensation at the time.
I thought the car allowance was based on the need for using the car.
I don't think it is.
And I
but-
don't think that she needs a car
That
in her
was
business.
that was the intent of the car allowance, was for the need for the vehicle.
And we pay mileage.
That's not,
I don't think that's what it's become. I don't like raising anybody's salary by that amount either, but I do think that there is an inequity, and unfortunately, we're stuck with the situation for 3 more years if we don't do anything about it now. So obviously, I will support this.
What's the motion?
Moved by Inman and seconded by Richardson, that the register of deeds get the same car allowance as the other elected officials.
Okay.
Ready to vote?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
no.
No. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Stepka?
No.
Richardson?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes?
Friend?
No.
Wheelock?
No.
Chairman Thomas?
No.
Tie vote.
Tie vote.
Okay, we gave it a valiant try.
Gee, where's Fleece when you needed him?
There's a reason why he took that vacation.
All right, we're still waiting for
He's-
elected officials.
He's
salary.
sleeping.
Okay, let's move that we raise elected officials' salaries by 1.5%, as recommended.
And eliminate the health insurance copay?
Oh, yes, that's, yes.
on the that's
Per
part of the
recommendation, yes.
I'll support for discussion.
Yeah.
Moved and supported, discuss.
I do not think we should do this. First of all, there's no way I'm giving the county surveyor a raise. I was opposed to the salary to begin with. And I agree with Commissioner Friend in the fact that every single elected official put their name on the ballot knowing what the salary was. And it ought to remain that way for the term of the office.
I feel that when we're doing a wage freeze, actually, with everybody else. Call it what you want, but that's what it is. So you don't start at the top and give raises, I don't think.
Well, my understanding, Dennis, is that we have not determined the raise for non-bargaining employees. That was yet to come. The amount is in the budget, but we've not determined the raise for those folks. We're solely determining the potential raise in elected official salaries at this time. And the whole premise behind that discussion, or that process was, you know, the elected officials was really going to kind of guide us as to how we dealt with the other employees. So if the intent of this board is not to give a raise for the elected officials, then I would feel that we would not give raises for the rest of the employees. If the intent is to give 1.5 to elected officials, then I would hope that our intent would be to give 1.5 for the rest of the employees, which we have yet to have that discussion. Is that correct, Dennis?
Well, you know.
Ping pong.
No, I don't mind you sending it to me, but I mean, I'm feeling a little bit like I felt last week.
Yeah.
You directed me to go negotiate increases for all our collective bargaining employees last week, and I have settled 2 of those contracts since last Tuesday night at 1.5%. Now, I'm a little alarmed by the discussion that we've said everybody else is going to get a wage freeze, because that's not the direction I got last week.
That's right.
I was just discussing
No,
elected
I know, I'm
officials.
talking about what the chairman mentioned.
Well,
I mean,
you know, we're not going to implement, that's what I meant.
oh, you meant Siegel. I just wanted you to be aware, I've got 2 tentative agreements based on your direction last week, so I just wanted you to be aware of that.
And that direction was for employees, not elected officials.
That's correct. Yeah, no, that's correct. But I just didn't, I was hoping that there wasn't some
Yeah,
decision
but-
not to give any raises to people that you sent me to go
But
talk
Dennis
to.
just said that he would use this vote as a guide for the rest of the 50 exempt employees.
In a recommendation, because
In a
I always make
recommendation.
recommendations on exempt employees. I usually don't on elected officials. So yes, I
Right.
would, yeah.
Larry?
Well, I took note of Commissioner Friend's comment about sending confusing messages to our staff.
Can I take some other comments I'd like
Yeah.
you to take note of?
Just wanted to kick that off to have a little fun with you. And that is, you know, we go 1.5 for bargaining units, and then if we don't go with the elected officials, then to me, you know, as long as I've been here, we've tried to be fair with everybody across the board. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and we kind of try to keep everybody equal. And that's kind of the state that, you know, that we've always said is that, you know, if you're not in a bargaining unit, you know, you don't have to be in a bargaining unit to be treated fairly. And, you know, I believe that if we give 1.5 to these bargaining units, I think we should give 1.5 to the elected officials, and I think we ought to give 1.5 to the staff members.
You know, I'm sorry, I forgot. You asked me for some information, and I didn't get a chance to give that to you. Commissioner Inman asked me yesterday to check what others in the
Public
area are giving for raises. And unfortunately, you know, it was very limited time, but I asked HR to look at it in terms of the public agencies. NMC is giving a 2% raise next year. TCAPS is giving a 2% raise next year to all their employees. Traverse City this July gave a 2% raise to their employees, which goes till June of next year. Munson would not make comment on what they were doing. And the Pavilions has some contracts next year settled at 4%. They're looking to renegotiate those down to 2%. So hope that helps.
Well, if I could just make a remark on that, one of the issues I had personally coming into the meeting is, one issue is the level of fairness between bargaining units and non-bargaining units, or people in non-bargaining units. And the other is, what's the reality in the community? What are the other major employers doing that are publicly funded? And as a guide. So that was the question I had Dennis research and get back to us on. Just whether it's relevant or not to you, I thought it was just a piece of information that would be helpful. Do we have
Sonny?
I guess, for me, I'm trying to figure out how Dennis keeps any sanity over on the other side of this table. One time we were telling him, we're going to go to 1.5%, and the next thing we know, we're discussing not doing any raises. We go negotiate 1/3 of Siegel, and then we withdraw that. Somewhere or another, this board's going to have to make a decision what we're going to do. This flip-flopping is just, you talk about sending mixed messages. I've had a multitude of discussions with county employees that, some of whom should have seen some pretty sizable raises based on the draft of the budget. And now all of a sudden they're not going to see any. And maybe they'll be negotiated 1.5% when they get to their union bargaining contract.
There are umpteen million private sector employees out there who are taking, I talked to an electrical engineer today who has taken a 25% cut in his salary. He can no longer afford to pay for health insurance for his kids. He only keeps it for himself because he's got to be healthy so he can continue to work. He's had to move 3 times in the state of Michigan recently to keep his job. I talked to a gentleman from GM who called me and said he has no health benefits at all as of January 1. I talked to another person who was a private businessman, had a car wash. He said, "Where are you looking?" He said, "Look in the real world." I got a call from somebody in Garfield Township. Their family has taken a 10% cut. We had negative inflation, or we've got negative inflation, 0.3, I believe. And right now on the table is elected officials' salaries. And you're telling me with a 0.3 negative inflation, we should give raises?
I believe the 2008 CPI was 4.2?
Or 4.4.
But the 2009 in June was negative 1.5.
Call the question.
I came tonight, prepared to basically ask for a wage freeze, as been discussed here completely. I think I would be willing to go with the 1.5%, but not the elimination of the copay. I think we need to keep the copay in place. So if you'd be willing to, was it your motion?
No, it was Bruce's.
Bruce's motion.
I think we can address that as a separate issue, a separate motion. I think. Why don't we try to do that?
One to do the
Well,
other.
I've already made a motion.
but we already have a motion on the floor.
Maybe withdraw your motion,
Let's
and we'll
just
just
vote.
attack it on two.
Let's just vote and start, and we may not even need to start over. Who knows?
You want to withdraw your motion?
Call the question.
You don't want to
Repeat
Call
the
the
motion,
question.
please.
all in favor of you want to read it?
The motion was to increase elected official salaries by 1.5% and eliminate the health insurance copay. That was moved by Hooper and seconded by Commissioner Wheelock.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Richardson?
No.
Maxbauer?
No.
Inman?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Friend?
No.
Wheelock?
No.
Stepka?
No.
Chairman Thomas?
No.
You want to make another motion?
I don't know.
Mr. Wheelock?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to eliminate the 10% health care copay by elected officials. I believe it's not consistent with any other group that we have. We freeze the wages, we eliminate the copay, because none of our other groups have a copay.
Is there support?
Support.
Discussion?
So I can clarify the motion. Is
Yeah.
the motion to keep the salaries the same and eliminate
Leave the
copay?
salaries where they are at 2009 levels and eliminate the health insurance
Okay.
copay.
All right.
It's kind of a compromise type thing.
Yep, it is.
Just, I want to be clear, eliminate the copay, no raise.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
Aye.
Roll call.
Commissioner Max Bauer,
No.
Inman,
Yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Brent,
No.
Wheelock,
Yes.
Stepka,
No.
Richardson,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes.
Passes.
5-3 vote.
5-2? 5-2?
5-3.
Okay.
3.
Fast.
Oh, that's
Got
right,
it
5
down.
and 3 is 8.
Yeah, okay. So it's good.
We get
It's late.
Yes, it is.
I realize
Can't
it's
count on your
10:30.
fingers,
We're
All
going to
right.
start these meetings
Anything else?
earlier.
Public comment.
No, we don't. No, we said we don't.
Oh, wow, we're actually done. We got close.
Don't make us sit here all night.
I know.
John
Porter, 4159.
Or just to kind of
Jack
give you
had a
the
nap for the
plan.
first 2 hours of
Spider
our
Lake
meeting,
Road.
so he didn't
It's
have
just
to be
scary.
here.
I was confused about the discussion, limited public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Does that mean unlimited public comment?
Actually, John, what it means is there would be limited public comment, and then there would be a regular public comment at the beginning after the public hearings, I believe, if I looked
No.
at that right. No?
No.
Then it shouldn't
I
say
said-
limited, it
I
should
said-
be regular.
I said
Move it up
follow the
above.
board
Okay, I
rules.
think-
Move it up.
That was a joke.
Jack's
That was
turn.
a joke.
That's what
What I came to talk about is septic. And I made a comment that I was supportive of the direction that the committee was going, with a couple exceptions relating to basically spreadsheet items. And I just kind of want to recant my testimony. I really can't support the direction you're going. Because what I think is happening is the county, and when I say the county, I'm referring to the county commission, the county board of public works, over the past dozen years or so. I mean, there's an institutional personality that's not any one individual, you know. I think the county has got it in their plan or unstated plan to stick to 5 townships, 5 urban townships, or 4 Grand Traverse County townships with the problems from this septic treatment plant financing. And to give you a little background as I see it, having been a township supervisor from 80 to 92, for about 30 years, 25 or 30 years, the townships were always backed by the county. Whenever we floated a bond issue, we always had the county backing our credit, and it helped us. And I wasn't in the room when the discussion took place, but I think at some point as this developed, it was a county project, and that the county asked the townships, after 25 or 30 years of backing the township's bond issues, every one of them said, will you back us with this project? How could the townships refuse, after 25 or 30 years of being backed by the county, to turn around and not back the county when they had a project for the community? So of course they had to go along with it, and to go ahead and say that this is a 5 township project is just wrong. Let me read something, and this was bubbling in the late 80s and early 90s, before I was out of office. Sometimes problems create opportunities. The disposal of septic and holding tank waste is becoming an increasing problem. County Board of Public Works has been exploring ways to deal with this important waste issue and is looking at a unique system to treat septic with a solar aquatic greenhouse. And that's kind of like a botanical garden, you know. Septic is the way it was sold, you know. However, more stringent land regulations to land, I'm skipping through this. By the way, this was a 1997 document by the Deputy Administrator of Grand Traverse County, Mac McClellan. So this is taking place in 1997. However, more stringent regulations to land apply septic and holding tank waste, coupled with decreasing availability of agricultural property with appropriate isolation distances to newly developed homes, is creating a crisis for homeowners in rural areas to adequately handle their wastewater. And then it goes on, a committee of the Board of Public Works has been established and is meeting monthly to explore methods to finance the facility and seek to resolve any unanswered questions. Now that may sound familiar. This is 12 years down the line, and this is still going on. And I don't think you're any closer to resolving that finance issue now. I think you've done a lot of work. You've educated yourselves, but I don't think you're close to solving it. If the urban townships get stuck with this, they're a minority vote. If they get stuck with this, it has broad implications for the community. The library in Long Lake Township comes to mind. Why would anybody in an urban township want to pay for a library in Long Lake if they get this septic plant bill stuck on them? Or senior center, right? Traverse City is where most of the seniors are. Why would the urban townships support that? Or the civic center, or the swimming pool? How many people go out and swim in a swimming pool of the 80,000 in this county? Why would they support that if they get stuck with this bill? I can see this spreading out. Paybacks are nasty, and they come back on different subjects across the board. And I can see this getting kicked down the can is just getting kicked down the road and kicked down the road. No decisions are being made, and at some point in the future, there's going to be a bond payment, and there's going to be the statement, well, the 5 townships own this problem, and they're the ones that are going to have to pay. Well, none of the 5 townships or the 4 townships we're talking about have ever defaulted on a bond issue or failed to make their obligation to the county, and I think it's really wrong to have that in your head, that this is an option for you, because it's really not the way to go. I went to the last meeting and I commented about the spreadsheet, and then I got the latest spreadsheet that's a combination of a dozen spreadsheets that have come before it, and the holding tank waste is still $120,000 a year, no change there. Special assessment revenue, $900,000. That's new. The 12-cent a gallon money is gone. Now, Ross Childs, former county coordinator, I don't think he's ever done a special assessment district, but he's been on the outside of the process and receives the money from the process. But he even said it's going to take a year to get this special assessment district in place. By December 1st of 2010 is probably the earliest you're going to get this done, and you're going to educate the public with a spreadsheet that's showing $900,000 in revenue for 2010 from special assessment district. That money could start coming in December 1st, 2010, but you won't have it until April or May 2011. So as I see this spreadsheet, you're off by $900,000 the first year. Where's your credibility? I can't support this, and you know, I've been the most supportive person in those meetings. Sorry. Any questions?
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm the last public person left.
I noticed.
You just stuck it out.
Sorry, it's sitting there a long time. Jamel Anderson, Grand Traverse 911, and I'd just like to make a couple comments about the health insurance copay and the fairness part of that. I think it was, I don't know, 4 years ago that we started paying it. I don't remember exactly, but I know that when that topic came up and the board put that to the non-contract people,
I really didn't think that much about it because I know how healthcare costs were going up, and I also know people in the private sector. So I thought, well, that's fair, and everybody should start paying, and we'll work towards, implementing that throughout the county. And I knew it would be a long process, but that's fine. I have to say that I'm pretty amazed that the Board of Commissioners doesn't pay the 10%, and disappointed, and was initially, because the thought never entered my mind that's the way that it would be. So here we are 4 or 5 years later, and I've been paying that 10%, and I don't have a problem doing that. I don't have a problem with you not implementing Siegel. But I'm an example of a person whose classification is supposed to be brought up to a market value. And I'm paying 10% of my health care and have been for 5 years. That fairness isn't there. And you guys are leaders in the community. And I'm sorry to tell you this right now, you're not doing a very good job. You got to step up and be you should have been the first ones to take the 10%. The very first ones out of the gate. And then when you realized, or when it was brought to your attention, that should have been fixed right away. Siegel, sure, everybody would like to make more money, but that's not the point. The point is make a decision, stick with the decision, even when it's hard, even when people call you on the phone and yell at you, no matter which side it is. Do the best you can and stay with that decision. What happened with the negotiations should have never happened. One of my groups was the first one that tentatively agreed to that. It should have never happened. Now we have to go back. And you're doing a disservice to all of us by doing that. There's a lot of good people on this board, and you have a lot of great qualities, and you got to step up and bring them out. There should only be one agenda when this board meets, and that's not what's happening. That's all.
Thank you. Notices. How's your calendars look?
Good.
Everybody happy?
All pretty
Yep.
pictures.
Yeah.
We have to go into closed session?
There is no need to go into closed session.
Motion for adjournment, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, man.
Motion to adjourn.
What?
Motion to adjourn.
There's something to be talking about.
Meeting adjourned.